Are we live? Yes. Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Present.
I have Andrew here. Emily here. Nicole Dolan. What? I'm sorry. Nicole King. Here.
You said William, I said, I'm
We're
here.
gonna chat later. Stephen Mullen.
Present.
Mary Jo Werner.
Here.
Priya Serene.
I'm here.
Christopher Ware.
Present.
Visitor comments?
Maria Alt.
Hello. Hello. Okay, there we go. Hello, my name is Maria Alt. I'm a mother of 2 daughters and founder of the Southern Lehigh Grassroots. This school year, I had to pull both my daughters out of the Southern Lehigh School District because boys are allowed in the girls' bathroom and locker rooms. To the 9 school board members, unfortunately, once again, you have been deceived by all those in authority around you, telling you that if you were to stop allowing boys in the girls' bathroom and locker rooms, and vice versa, that you will lose if a case would be brought before you. That is not true. The truth is that there is no law on allowing people in the bathroom that they identify with. There have been a couple of bad cases, like the Boyertown case that sided with students to use the bathroom that they identify with. Those cases centered around using facilities that align with gender identity. The Department of Education and Department of Justice have abused their powers to interpret Title IX that gender is separate from sex when it is not. The entire basis of Title IX is that sex exists and matters. We have to take legal steps to make sure one sex isn't inadvertently, unreasonably disadvantages based on sex. Bringing new definition of gender into Title IX interpretation is fatal to the purpose of the act. Again, there is no law on the bathroom issue, and the precedence is changing in the right direction and can continue to change with your courage and bravery. The Eastern Lancaster School District successfully passed a privacy policy in multi-user facilities based on sex after that Boyertown case, and they have not been sued. School board members, you joined the school board to make sure the children receive an excellent quality education and to protect the children. Therefore, if you do the right thing by implementing a privacy policy, stopping people from using the bathroom they identify with means risking possible litigation, then let it happen. Your job is to protect all of the children. It is not to avoid litigation. If you do the right thing and implement a private policy based on sex, I am sure that you will have the support of the majority of the community, people in the state, country, and the Supreme Court. I have compassion for those struggling with gender identity, and I believe you all do. However, forcing someone else to participate in your feeling about who you are is not something a society can or should be shaped around. A single gender-neutral bathroom with a lock can be put into place for those struggling with their gender identity. This way, everyone has a right to their privacy. I spoke at the state Senate government hearing last Tuesday at the Capitol in support of Senator Doug Mastriano's Parents' Right bill, which was voted out of committee today. The verse John 8:32 is on the back wall of the House chamber of the PA State Capitol. John 8:32 says, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." In conclusion, please do the right thing and implement a privacy policy based on sex to protect all students' privacy. Thank you.
All right, good evening. I have 2 daughters who are attending Southern Lehigh School District. I have 2 things that I want to speak out real briefly tonight. I don't know if everybody saw, but there was a national article last week that was sent out by one of the administrators of the intermediate school. and staff on October 7, 2021. As per the email, it says if a student shares their concerns over their gender identity, teachers are instructed not to share this information with parents. I personally think that it's incomprehensible that this district thinks kids who are as young as 9 years old should be navigating these life decisions and working through them without their parents being involved. Parents should absolutely be involved in these discussions and not purposely excluded by the school policies. I love my kids unconditionally. I support them in all they do. As a parent, I am deeply troubled by the fact that the school policy is to hide this information from me and not allow me to be a parent, love and support my child when life happens. I understand there's a confidentiality piece to this. However, in my opinion, the school should be directing to include all parents, kids, teachers, and guidance counselors to help these kids, and not to have a game plan directed that spells out a way to hide this information from the parents. My second concern is the current bathroom policy of allowing anyone to use a bathroom and I identify with. I think all students in Southern Lehigh School District should be able to go to a school bathroom and feel safe. However, this is not currently the case. There are biological females in our district who are currently uncomfortable using the bathroom. Some have even left our school district. Why can't we find a compromise? I don't think having a policy that makes some feel comfortable at the expense of others is the answer. We need to find a way for those who follow biological gender and those who don't to feel included and feel comfortable. Why can't we have students use bathrooms based on biology? For those who don't, provide bathrooms, as Maria said, maybe single usage for safety that are available to those kids. This way everybody would feel safe and comfortable and have a bathroom available to them. Can't we work to try to get there so that all kids feel comfortable and safe? Also, there appears to be, based on the email that was sent out last year, concern about potential Title IX violations and things of that sort. However, why does this administration and this board feel as though their hands are tied? There have been legal decisions on both sides of this issue within Pennsylvania. I ask the board tonight to be bold and start the process of forming a new bathroom policy so that all, not some, but all, kids can feel safe in student bathrooms. In closing, I would also like to request some greater transparency on these issues in regards to communications with the community. These policies should have been made available and communicated to the community. We should not be finding out about them a year later from news articles, from our kids or parents who are affected by these policies. We've talked for about 2 years about transparency, and I'm asking the district and the board to be transparent with current school policies and future policies that are affecting our kids. Thank you.
William Schuyler.
Thank you. I notified the board more than 7 weeks ago of a written direction from the principal of our intermediate school to all employees at the IS that they hide gender identity information of students from their parents, use new names and new pronouns selected by students without parent consent, and to take direction from students on what to call the student when speaking with his or her parents. Bear in mind, we're talking about 9 to 12-year-old children. I then provided you with a copy of that document, giving you definitive proof. The direction still has not been reversed. Respectfully, it doesn't take 7 weeks to conclude that this was wrong from the start and at least pause it while considering next steps. While I'm sure the principal's direction was well intended, this intentional deception by district employees is an egregious interference with parent rights. It's deeply unfair to put our teachers in a position of having to actively deceive parents by concealing essential information about a child's social, emotional, psychological, and potentially physical well-being from his or her parents to satisfy a job expectation set out by their principal. We are requiring teachers to breach the trust parents put in them. Our teachers are not primary caregivers, parents are. In this area, it's the teacher's job to inform parents of information that is relevant to a child's well-being so that parents can make the important decisions. If a teacher believes a student is at risk of abuse or is being abused, they're required to report it under mandated reporting rules. So this policy is obviously about something else. The email in question was dated October 7, 2021, well before Dr. Mahan joined the board, well before this board was constituted based on the previous election. Neither Dr. Mahan nor this board bears responsibility for this policy that's been adopted at the IS. That said, it's yours now. A behind the scenes redo of a policy that was behind the scenes in the first place is not acceptable. This is an issue that affects all of our schools, students, teachers, and staff, and relates directly to the well-being of students and the right of their parents to raise them. District-wide policies should be discussed at open meetings before the public, not behind the scenes with input from the very people who gave us the faulty policy to start with. If this situation doesn't merit a public discussion resulting in clear guidance for how the superintendent should manage our district, respectfully, I don't know what would. Thank you.
Michelle Braille.
Good evening. Hi, everyone. Gender affirmation is a new care model for the gender dysphoria, previously gender identity disorder. It requires society and medical professionals to affirm one's gender identity unrelated to their biological sex in order to relieve the stress that comes with identifying as the opposite gender or no gender at all. It requires society to accept that gender is not based on the two sexual gonads in human nature, the testes and the ovaries. Rather, gender is a sort of abstract continuum, and society must believe and accept that a person can actually truly change their gender to be a gender that does not align with their biological sex. They are no longer to be seen and treated kindly as a transgender girl or boy, but as a girl or a boy. Gender affirming medical care is being sold to children, including potent hormones to prepubertal children and surgical procedures, including breast removal, to 15-year-old children. All of this, we are told by medical professionals, will prevent the emotional turmoil and suicidal ideation that is caused by societal treatment of a person with gender incongruence. There is no longer a cause to identify a reason for gender identity incongruence because it is now considered a normal variance. The problem is medicine gets things wrong a lot. Just ask about the history of hormone replacement therapy in this country. When I began training in the 90s, HRT was advised for every postmenopausal woman, regardless of age, based on large observational studies showing a cardiovascular and other benefits. Then, after an excess amount of women began having heart attacks and strokes, the pendulum swung in the opposite direction, and almost no woman was prescribed HRT. Medicine gets things wrong a lot. The fact is, we have absolutely no data on the long term effects of this new shift in diagnosis and treatment of gender identity issues. All data we have on the topic is subject to a number of flaws, including small sample sizes and lack of randomized trials, as well as short follow up. We have no idea if this new shift will lead to fewer suicides in the population. We know that after attempting this shift, children are identifying in large numbers as being transgender. Still rare in adults, children in New England now identify as transgender at rates of 1.8 per 100. That is almost 2 out of every 100 children who fundamentally hate the body they were born with. The fact is, there is no data regarding the impact of social affirmation on gender incongruence. And social contagion in the era of TikTok has yet to be studied adequately. Will the growing numbers of those experiencing gender identity incongruence expected to lead to fewer suicidal children and adults? There is no way anyone can honestly say that they have a clear answer to that question. We really have no data. During the past 40 years, it has been shown that the majority of children who experience gender discordance would eventually identify with their biological sex by puberty. What will be the long-term effects of having such a high proportion of children who now identify as a gender incongruent with their biology? What happens to all those who are now infertile or who have altered their body and regret it? Will they feel suicidal? Will anyone in the medical field apologize if they find long-term their interventions did not achieve the desired outcome? Or will they simply say, the science has changed? After all, isn't that what they are saying now? And then that's to be continued.
Kim Snyder.
In continuation of Dr. Frail's thoughts, the second problem with gender affirmation is that it relies on society to change societal norms, but most people in society have not been let in on the new rules pertaining to this change. It seems that those advocating for societal acceptance and gender affirmation as appropriate treatment thought it best to begin in the schools with children and with a purposeful exclusion of parents in the process. Unless you were privy to the training by the likes of CHOP, how would you know this is even happening? Many parents are just now beginning to understand this is taking place, but are far from understanding the ideology of this transition, the new vocabulary being taught to their own children, and many are not in agreement with making this societal shift. They refuse to ignore the facts that babies are born as girls or boys, that there are two biological sexes, and that these sexes have inherent differences based on biology that cannot be wished away. They understand that there is a reason that restrooms and locker rooms have been divided into separate spaces based on sex, and that Title IX was developed to protect girls, to give girls a fair place to compete, recognizing a biological difference between the sexes. They are not in agreement with referring their child to a counselor without their knowledge, who is taught to encourage exploration of medical and surgical gender affirmation therapy through websites geared towards a pre-pubertal child. They fundamentally hope and pray their child loves themselves as they are. I believe that abandoning these delicate social norms is dangerous. It is dangerous for girls to be told that they have to deny their feelings of anxiety when faced with a male in the girls' dressing room. The fact is, 9 out of 10 victims of sexual assault are females, and almost all perpetrators are males. 1 in 6 women will be the victim of a sexual assault. Boys and girls alike need to know that they have the right to privacy and a right to their feelings, to protect themselves. We need to ensure they have this. If I have learned anything from being a Catholic school mom or Cub Scout leader, it is that sexual predators exist and are often in the positions of authority over children. My extensive training hours in both of these organizations have taught me that grooming is the first step predators use, and that it often includes keeping sensitive secrets from parents. However, now apparently in the name of gender-affirming societal change, educators are being taught the parents are the bad guys. With growing numbers of children experiencing gender identity issues and many more experiencing questions about their sexuality, educators are putting signs on their door indicating that they are a trusted adult, one who will not tell. While the Boy Scouts has initiated too deep leadership, and every email sent to a Boy Scout must include a CC to a parent or other adult, educators are instructed to be open to private conversations and to never alert the parents if a child confides in them privately about the most personal of issues. Like my own Catholic church, I hope Southern Lehigh will never have a sexual predator on staff. However, if there was one, the next step would be to point that child who has confided in them to a book, perhaps Fun Home, available on Sora, that desensitizes them to the very sexual acts you want to perform. The fact is, medicine gets things wrong a lot. They change positions a lot. Many of you understood that during the COVID pandemic. I am urging you to use your own basic understanding of the truth to apply your intuition about rights and wrong, and to use whatever power or voice you have to make policy that is right and that is truthful, and that it does not put children in danger, and most of all, one that includes parents in the process. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Maybe just a quick moment of silence for the teenage girl and health teacher that were killed today in St. Louis shooting. Also, happy Diwali to anyone who observes it. May the Festival of Light fill your life with happiness. Third, my wife is thrilled and nervous about volunteering this week at the high school. She'll be teaching suturing to some biology classes tomorrow. So please keep her in mind. Fourth, national math and reading scores were released. Moving forward, we need to continue to focus on academics. I know you will continue to support efforts prioritizing investments in learning, adding services and staff where possible, and investing in high quality materials and curriculum. You will strive to meet the needs of our students, which brings me to our next topic. Regarding some gender identity conversations, regarding student privacy, while not the law, the American School Counselors Association states transgender students should decide with whom and to what extent to share private information. This exact language is repeated in several Pennsylvania district policies. Regarding bathroom policy, procedures here were told to be collaborative and case by case, which I appreciate. It was said that there are not templates, but there are policies out there. I would refer the board, and I can send you copies if you want, of policies in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Colonial. They all have languages on student privacy, on preferred pronouns, and on bathroom usage. Who are we talking about here? 2 reports this week shed some light. 97% of LGBTQ and transgender students have heard gay used in a negative way at school. 90% have said they are worried about being denied access to the preferred bathroom. 80% reported feeling unsafe in school and avoiding school functions and extracurricular activities. 80% of transgender individuals have considered killing themselves. 3/4 reported verbal harassment, 1/3 physical harassment, and 60% of those did not report the incident to school staff, which means we might not even know the full extent. 3 of the top 10 reasons that these students do not get mental health care are fear-based: fear of discussing, fear of parents, fear of being accepted. I always said in my classroom, we can lift each other up or put others down. We can empower somebody and change how students see themselves in our schools. We can model respect and create safe places. How might our actions and words and deeds either support or suppress our students? We all want what is best in the best interests of each student. They are our children. Thank you.
Nicole Dolan.
Hello. I kicked myself for not saying present during roll call, just as a joke. Um, so I read the same information that some other parents here referenced about the email that went out to parents. I think it was last year. And I'm here to thank administrators for instructing your staff to create an environment that nurtures any and every child as they navigate their identity. Every child deserves to feel safe and supported. Even as a parent who would accept all aspects of my child's identity and who hopes that I raise them to know that they can tell me anything, I can still accept the possibility that they might not be ready to tell me first. It might happen. And in case that happens, I'm grateful to know that they will be able to turn to their community of teachers and school staff to support them. I trust that counselors and staff would work to help my child become ready to tell me. I would not view it as staff keeping information from me. So thank you very much for protecting student privacy in this way. Regarding a single stall gender neutral bathroom, in general, I don't see a problem with having them in our schools. What I do have a problem with is restricting transgender students to using only the gender neutral bathrooms or bathrooms that match their sex assigned at birth. Not all transgender students are out. Making any restrictions forces those students to be outed, thus violating their privacy. When a trans girl walks into the boys' bathroom, they're being forced to out themselves. When everyone knows that the gender neutral bathroom was put in place for transgender students, then anyone who uses it will be assumed to be transgender. So again, they're being forced to out themselves. However, if you have a single stall gender neutral bathroom, but still allow transgender students to use any bathroom they choose, then cisgender students who are uncomfortable with who might be in the bathroom are welcome to use the single stall gender neutral bathroom if they choose. So I support the idea of having those in the schools. I hope that there's good places for them, and I hope it's not too much, work to get them in. But I see them as being beneficial for a very different reason. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We have minutes, Board Solicitor.
Yes, thank you. An executive session was held on October 18th to discuss a legal matter, and an executive session was held tonight before the regular board meeting to discuss several student-related issues.
Can I have a motion to approve the board minutes of September 26, 2022, and a motion to approve the board workshop minutes of October 10th, 2022?
Second.
Any comments or questions?
Yeah, I have a comment. If you would please split those votes, since I was not here on the 10th. I'll just abstain from voting on the 10th.
Okay,
Thank you.
all in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. Dr. Mann?
Don't we have to vote twice?
Oh, I'm sorry, did we not vote?
We
We
have to
do.
vote twice, though. We're separating.
I assume you took the September.
I read for both minutes.
We assume you took the September 26th motion first, and we have not yet voted on October 10th because
I did
Mr.
both
Mons.
together, actually.
Yeah, but Mr. Mons' request was for those to be split so that he could
Oh,
vote
you want
on
the
one and
split,
abstain on
okay.
the other.
I just
I'm
wanted to
sorry.
abstain from the 10th.
So
Sorry
we all,
about that.
we all assumed we just voted on September 26th, so we're good right now.
But now we're going to vote on.
But now if we need a motion for the October 10th.
Okay, can I have a motion for the 10th?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions other than the abstention? Okay, all in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved for October 10th.
Okay, I want to join Mr. Carney in wishing all those who are celebrating a happy Diwali tonight. It's a great and exciting celebration. I know I was celebrating with my neighbors over the weekend. And moving on to construction, our primary report tonight comes from Mr. Pepe under cash management and an update. However, I do want to raise a new topic somewhat related to construction, and that is related to our technology infrastructure. You will see on tonight's agenda, there is a motion asking the board to authorize the administration to get some assistance in applying for e-grants. Our intention is to apply for funding. We expect to have results from that process back around March. We are currently looking to order about 50 switches and about over 300 access points that really we hope to have about a 40% reduction in cost because of the federal funding. We want to get to work on this as soon as possible. We anticipate the biggest problem is going to be the supply chain, where it's very likely we will have funding in place prior to actually being able to expend the funds. So we intend to order the supplies as early as possible. Our tech department is very excited about this development. We do believe that it will have a very positive impact on our infrastructure with respect to our students' ability and our staff's ability to access the internet, which particularly at the start of this year was a very significant challenge. So we'll continue to keep the board posted on those developments as well as some other IT infrastructure projects that we have at hand. And we can certainly discuss the item in play once it arrives on the agenda, but we are looking forward to the board's approval as we get the formal start to this technology upgrade tonight. So with that, Mr. Pepe, you have some information to provide regarding our projects and particularly how we're going to plan on paying for them.
So thank you, Dr. Mann. I think I'm going to move around a little bit on this tonight. So the presentation tonight that we wanted to bring to you is on two topics, cash management and financing capital projects. The information which I gave to the board members is a companion handout that will help you understand some of what I'm going to put up here tonight. So we'll start with cash management. So cash management really has it's a 5-step process. And step one of that process is simplifying liquidity. And what we really want to do is try and keep all our revenue streams going in the same direction as far as our actual cash that we have available to get interest on. And in order to do that, we first have to start with the next step, which is classifying our cash. And you basically need to classify it into 3 buckets. And that is operational cash, which is our immediate needs, such as my glasses. All right, thank you. So anyway, the immediate needs is our operating cash. The next bucket is strategic cash, which is investments that are short term, typically 3 to 6 months. And then finally, we have bucket number 3, which is reserve cash. And that's for investments that are long term or up to 1 year as the life of the board. So then going on to the next step in the process is to actually gauge our needs. And that's where the superintendent was talking about as we look out at what we have. And in this case, I need to work with my staff to develop a drawdown schedule to see how much we actually need to have available each month as we start paying bills and bills become due. Consider all assumptions in that. We looked at salaries, inflation adjustments. Inflation's running about 8.3%. So we have to factor that in month over month and not just necessarily look at what last year's bills were for this particular month. And then ultimately, we're moving along into interest and trying to increase the rate of return. The good news is in the past 3 months, we've moved from 0.30 to 2.9. That's an increase of about 896% on what we're actually gaining on our monies month to month. And if you remember last month when I was talking about the treasurer's report, I said, forget the bills list. The big story is the treasurer's report. You start to see that we're actually getting more interest month over month. And that allows us to tailor our investment plan for our overall cash management. And that's what I'm going to break down for you. So starting with our goal. And our goal is to remain in a beneficial relationship with a bank that is both responsive to our needs and competitive within the region. So it's not necessarily that we're just going to bank with the same bank that we've always banked with. We want to maintain the relationships that we have, but we want to make sure that they're working for us in delivering that to us. As part of our cash management strategy, we've transferred balances held with other banks at lower rates, and we've moved our deposits to QNB, given the attractive interest rate of 2.9% currently that we're experiencing with them. This move will net an increased yield of about $150,000 in the next 3 months as we draw down our balance to cover expenses. So you can start to see where that is really beneficial to the district. So the next question is, what about security of our investments? Well, Act 72 requires that governmental entities in Pennsylvania have to have deposits only in institutions that can back them or collateralize the deposits that are in excess of FDIC insurance. So when you talk about your $250,000 FDIC or $500,000 if you have a joint account, we go well beyond that. So we need to ensure that every dollar that we have deposited is collateralized with our particular bank. And that was confirmed with QNB as late as 9/30/2022. The Pennsylvania legislature enacted Act 72 in 1971, and they amended it in 2000 to enable financial institutions to help pool in order to provide that additional collateralization that's needed. So every dollar that we have invested or parked in a liquid account is collateralized. So now I'm going to move on to the next portion of the investment plan, and that's short and long term. And as you can see, it's less money available in the strategic and the reserve. The operating covers the bulk of what we actually have. The operating is fully liquid, so we have to have the ability to utilize as these bills come in. So on the bottom of the screen, you'll see PSDLAF, and PSLAF is the Pennsylvania School District Liquid Asset Fund. So what I'm going to show you now is the breakdown of the strategic and reserves. So in the strategic portion, we have a 6-month treasury bill where we have $13.2 million at 3.87%. And if you're looking at interest rates, they have gone up. and we're capitalizing on the increase in the rates that are out there. And we also, for our reserves, we're able to move money into a one-year treasury bill, and only 10 million of that, but that's at 4%. So together, that activity is going to gain us $642,000. Now, you would sit there and say, well, wow, that's a lot of extra money. What are we going to do with that money? Well, that's going to actually help us as we're building the next budget to reduce our need on increasing taxes. Because what we will do is now look to this as a portion of our revenue stream. And therefore it will, negate the need to raise taxes, to the ACT index. So it's basically making sure that we're utilizing the money that we have and the interest rates that are available to work for us. So now I'm going to move on to the next part, which is financing capital projects. This is a three-step approach. It starts with needs assessment, availability of funds, and securing additional funds. Now, the needs assessment has been ongoing, and it started a couple of years back. And what we've been doing is looking at the information that we had to go over and augmenting that with other needs that have come up, such as the facility needs, like when we looked at the IS, for instance. Then we look at availability of funds I was talking about, like what we have in capital reserve for capital projects. We also look at any need for securing additional funds, and that's what we're going to talk about right now with what's potentially out there. So when I look at the financing capital projects, Superintendent and I and the Facilities Committee have been talking pretty much about these three projects. The stadium project, which is parked around 6.6 million. The high school HVAC project, which currently we're aware of about 2.7 million. We're still looking into the rest of that building for a holistic look at all HVAC needs. But you'll notice you see in gold up there, ARP ESSER funding, 1.5 million. So we're going to offset a large portion of that project with the ESSER funds that were available for indoor air quality and improvement. That is an eligible expense that will help us get a lot, closer into that project. The IS brick repair project, again, TBD, to be determined. We're still waiting to get overall numbers for that. But if you start to add up the numbers, you can see we're clearly close to the 8 million mark, and that's what we're going to be talking about last. So when you look at this slide, it's about getting prepared, and I just wanted to kind of recap for the board and for the audience as to what's happened and what's next. So start in the first column. We worked with our financial advisor, Concord Public Finance, and this goes back to, I think, April, May. We were already talking about this particular issue, and we were trying to decide, given the market and where things were going, is it better to look at a bank loan or a bond? And in the middle column, next, we took a lot of time to go through and look at the analysis of all the dollars at stake and the cost of issuance. So for instance, if we were to issue a bond for $8 million, I think the cost of issuance was parked around $160,000 versus a bank note, the cost of issuance is closer to $50,000. So obviously it's much more attractive, and that to go with a bank qualified loan that's under 10 million. And then we took it a step further and we said, well, let's prove out our hypothesis and let's do an RFP for a bank note. So we put an RFP out in July of 2022, and guess what? We got great rates that are still locked in until about, I think, November 11th. I think that was the date that we were able to get them in. So on a 15-year bank note, we're locked in for the first 7 years at 2.82%. And if you remember the math going back, I was telling you about roughly getting 4% on monies we have invested. That's a really good trade-off. The other 8 years of that 15-year is a variable, but it's capped. It's capped at 4.25. And the best part of this is we have all the flexibility in the world because we have up to 3 years to draw down, and we also have no repayment or prepayment penalties. So we can pay that off as we get into, year 8 if we so chose to do so. And we can also help service the bank note or bank loan with some of the interest that we were talking about. So there's a lot of options there. Then we took it a step further and we went actually out for an RFP on our bond counsel to ensure that we are with the right bond counsel and the right firm. And I'm happy again to report that with our recent addition of King Spry and that relationship, that allowed us to get Kevin Reed, who is a certified bond counsel, and they waived the solicitor fee because we're already involved with them. So that was a major savings to utilize, because even if you're using the bank note, you still need bond counsel to help review and prepare that. So that's where we are, and then final steps and what's left to be done. So November 1st, we're going to issue the notice of award for $8 million on the bank note. We have to have the advertisement, and that's going to be actually placed by King Spry on our behalf, and that's our bond counsel doing that. On November 7th will be the board workshop, and that's when we need to approve to secure the $8 million bank note by the Board of Education before it expires. So that's kind of a little bit of both, and I'm sure there may be some questions. So at this point, I'll open up to Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Pepe. Any questions or comments?
If I could just add, thank you, Mr. Pepe. That was absolutely great. And I just wanted to talk about the strategy of repaying the loan because we have a great change since last we spoke about this. And the change is that there was no change in the loan opportunity at 2.8%, but there's been very substantial change in the amount of interest that we can earn on our investments. So what we thought was like a negative difference back when we had this discussion has now turned into a positive difference, which drives the rationale for taking the loan. However, what has not changed is our approach to repayment of the loan or payment. We originally said we're going to draw down the fund balance and pay for this directly when interest rates were not in our favor. Well, we still do not anticipate or intend to enter the payment for the loan into our operational budget. Rather, we intend to draw down the fund balance to pay the loan, and yet at the same time, we'll be enjoying a positive differential with respect to the interest rates. So this will not have ultimately it will draw down our fund balance, but that's the purpose of having it. We are changing now because instead of having an interest penalty, so to speak, when we did it, we now have an interest premium. And this will be separate and distinct from our operational expense. We're spending money as we should spend it. And again, in I think a very thoughtful way, as Mr. Pepe has described. So just wanted to add that. And, obviously now there'll be questions from board members.
I really appreciate that, that we were able to maneuver based on what's happening with interest rates. So then the repayment from our fund balance would occur over what time period then you're thinking? Just the repayment plan would be set forth like on a routine basis on
Yes.
we would expect to pay it back over what length of time?
Yeah.
I think
We haven't gotten the loan, I know, but
Yeah, the easiest way to explain that is typically with any debt service, you would annually have principal and interest
Right.
payments that come due. So there would still be an amortization schedule. What we would do is year over year, we would have the ability to determine whether or not we want to build that into our operating budget.
Okay.
Or if we simply say, you know what, we're not going to put it in the budget, the bill's still going to come due, but we're going to make the payment out of our capital reserve by drawing down our reserve.
and over what length of time would you expect? Like what length loan would you
Well, it's a
expect?
15-year loan.
It is a 15-year.
But it depends on how we're doing and what we're looking
Right, could
to.
we change
how-
it?
Right, how long
Okay.
we want to let it go.
Right.
That's what I want to know, because there's room
So-
for negotiation,
Well-
because if interest rates change or,
And that's it. So long as we're earning a premium, we want to run the loan as long as we can. But to the extent that interest rates say crater and the 6-month CD or since 6-month treasury bill comes due and we're not renewing at a higher rate, then that opens the prospect of early repayment, which there is no penalty, which is really the nicest thing about this. And we'll only draw the money that we need because it's over 3 years we can draw it. So this is thanks to Mr. Pepe's work, this is really working out for us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I have a question. The money that is sitting, gaining interest for us, is that not directly related to the general fund, to the,
No.
It's not.
No, what happens is if you know every year, whenever you have the audit, they talk about your reserves. The monies that are in the reserve, like right now, monies that would be in capital reserve, monies that are not necessarily needed within the next couple of months, that's what's out in the longer. So for instance, the $13.2 million is coming back in April of 2023, that early. Because if I could have put more out, I would have to get the higher interest. But I had to be cautious that we're not finding ourselves in a situation where we can't pay our bills. And if you think about it, what makes all the sense in the world is at what time of the year, like one of the handouts that I gave you was a history of investment. And in the past, if you notice that it's pretty much on target with what's happened in the past, with the exception of in the past, you've simply moved money to other banks that had a better rate. Okay, where this time we're a little more aggressive by utilizing the Pennsylvania School District Liquid Asset Fund. We're getting much higher rates, and we're keying in on the T-bills because where the market is. So in 17, 18, at this time, there was 20 million that was, like I say, pushed out and then pulled back. 18, 19 was 23 million. Fiscal year 20, 23 million. Next year, 24 million. Last year was only 13 million. And now I'm looking at 23.5. So it's right in line strategically, and it has to do with collection of taxes. Because most people are trying to, pay the taxes within the first 60 days to get the 2% discount. So if anyone's fortunate enough to be able to do that, that's fine. But then we're collecting more revenue up front, and then we're sitting on it until we're drawing it down over the next 6 months or up to the next year. So it's simply putting our money to work for us.
So then I just want to make sure I understand. But so then you're suggesting then that we do not use our fund balance to pay for all of the things that we need to do. We should take out the bank loan to do that.
It's gonna be like a hybrid approach.
Okay.
Okay, because right now it's just like when interest rates were very, very, very low, and people would say, it's cheap money. Now's the time to borrow. Okay, we actually have projects that right now it makes more sense for us to invest the monies we have and take the loan because it's actually more beneficial under the line. And again, we have the ability to repay at any time. So, just here's another way to look at it as far as like cash management. We don't budget from, year to year. We try and look at a 5-year approach. Well, when it comes to debt service, I'm already looking out beyond. I'm looking at year 9, year 8. Year 8, if we take no new debt on, and as the superintendent pointed out, if we don't build it into the budget and we plan on servicing it out of our actual reserve, it's kind of like we're taking the loan, but we are going to pay it off and we're going to manage it out of the reserve. If we decide we get to a point where we can't continue to do that, we always have the ability to budget it into the annual budget. But right now, I think in year 8, we have about 4 million that's going to fall off from existing debt. And that's about what would be left on this. So even if we decided to keep it for the length of the 15 years, we would simply be able to replace the existing debt that we're servicing with this new debt at the same rate. If that's the way we went. The best way to really end this is it gives you every option possible. And that's really one of the things we were trying to do is provide enough options. And a lot of credit to Concord Financial. When I first started working with him, I said, well, how do we protect ourselves from borrowing more than we actually need? And that's when we started talking about the bank loan. And I know the superintendent and I have had many conversations of the benefits of a bank loan over a bond. If we bond, we bond. Once you bond, you have the proceeds from the bond and you have to pay it back. And there's no flexibility that we have with the bank note.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Am I hearing you say just in that last bit that when the flexible rate for this loan with the cap of 4.25 would kick in, that's about the time when the other bond, the other debt service would fall off of our books? Did I hear that
About
correctly?
4 million.
At about the
Yes.
same timing, right?
Yeah,
So that's
well,
convenient for budgeting as
correct.
well. Thank you. All right. I just wanted to clarify that I heard that correctly. That's great. Thanks.
Yeah, that's correct.
I don't know if you'd want to answer this now or later, but when we talk about the HVAC improvements for 2.7 million, could you go into how that is just part of what needs to happen over time here beyond that, just so that everyone has a fairly clear understanding?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think one of the things that we're holding off on action tonight is we have EI Associates coming back for a more holistic approach to the building, that particular building. And that's just one building, the high school. And what's all involved when we talk about HVAC. Right now, we're talking about rooftop units, we're talking about chillers. We're not addressing unit ventilators, which are in every classroom. So if we were to replace all the unit vents, there's a high price tag that would go along with that. But again, we would have to make an assessment of what is the condition, what year are they in, how much life is left in them. You know, we don't want to prematurely replace equipment, but that needs to be looked at. Boilers. The boilers have a certain age to them. They're certainly not new. Are they operating as efficiently as possible? Does that need to be considered? There's a lot of things, there's a lot of factors over the next years, Mr. Mon, that's going to add to the overall need for facilities. You know, we talked about, we looked at our roofs a couple of months back, and we had a gentleman come in and meet with the facility committee for a roof analysis. We got some good news as far as roofs were in better condition than we had anticipated. But yet I know they had identified one of the roofs that will need to be replaced, and that was over at Liberty Bell, correct. So, you know, there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And again, we haven't seen the overall dollars from the IS, from the brickwork. So we're waiting for that number. So,
And then don't we also have HVAC concerns at the middle school? I remember way back when we were talking about that with the construction project. I believe
Yeah.
there were still some needs there.
and I think the reason why we zeroed in on the high school to start with was
Because the
grant.
ESSER funding, yeah.
Yeah, because the ESSER grant.
There's no way we can get that for the middle school too.
Well, there's only X amount of money
Oh,
available, and
right.
we're trying to max it out. I mean, we would certainly take more grant
Yeah,
opportunity
yeah,
if it comes
I know.
along.
The other aspect of that, I think, went into the prioritization was the failure
Yeah.
of the chiller at the high
Correct.
school also, where we've not had that, to my knowledge, at the middle school.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Appreciate it, Mr. Pepe, and very good overview. I'm appreciative to our new solicitor there. I think it's been a good choice there with the ability to have bond counsel. So I'll attribute that to Attorney Moyer, even though you're not bond counsel. I think that's a good savings for the district, and I'm really been pleased with our new solicitor's firm in all regards. Just one question on the, and I very much appreciate the hybrid approach as you describe it. And I do like that we do not get a prepayment penalty. I was curious if we do choose to pay it, you know, and some of these are some pretty substantial amounts of money potentially, prepayments, I suspect. Is it possible to even potentially like recast it? Like, in other words, affect the amortization table, or are we just simply paying it in advance, or could we actually adjust? Would that actually adjust payment? Do you understand what I'm?
Yes, it would actually be adjusted as you go along.
Okay, so that's,
depending on what you're doing.
which is
100%.
an even greater benefit.
And yeah, and that starts off with the, I opened with whether or not we were going to utilize 8 million. Okay, now at this point, I think we will. Okay, but not necessarily do we have to, or let's say everything came in great and the IS was a lot, you know, less than we expected, and nobody wants to throw a number around, trust me. But the point is, when they set up the initial amortization schedule, it's based on you borrowing the 8 million. If we determined that we were only going to borrow 7 million, then they would have to rework the amortization schedule and it would go into effect.
Thank you.
And the determination of whether or not we're going to need to borrow the full 8 million will be made prior to the board vote on November 7th? Or is that something that, is this more of a line of credit than a, or a?
Yeah, it's more of a line of credit.
Okay, thanks.
We have the authorization to use up to the 8 million.
Okay.
I think we're quickly approaching the total amount. And
We will certainly communicate to the board what we intend to do before we need to do it. It just seems that we're heading to the 8 million, and given the positive difference in interest rates, we are less hesitant to borrow more for legitimate expenses because we're going to have to do it anyway. So the borrowing actually is
That
to
brings
our
up-
advantage.
That brings up a great point. One of the IRS rules and regulations around us taking the loan is we have to present the need. So that was one of the other reasons why we were feverishly trying to get the IS number. And when we got the HVAC number at the high school, it kind of already put us in a good spot. In working with bond counsel, again, trying to retain flexibility. When you look at the ultimate resolution that's going to come from King Spry, it's going to stipulate for the stadium, it's going to stipulate for the HVAC work and or other capital projects, which gives us, again, the greater flexibility that if something else were to pop up within the next 3 years, we'd still be able to assign it to this loan.
That brings up, thank you for clarifying that. That brings up something else I remember, that is, not only do we have to demonstrate the need, but we also, correct me if I'm wrong, have to utilize the funds within that three-period
Within the 3
window,
years,
correct?
yes.
Okay, so that is still a timeline that we're, okay, great.
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
And, I think the best way to put that is Dr. Mann had said, we'll continue to update the board as we go along. Once we know we're going to commit 100% of the funds, whether we do that this year or in year 2.
Right. That's the big benefit of not having a bond, because when you have a bond, you have the funds that you have to spend. Now we can take loans out over a period of 3 years and only utilize what is necessary, and not just have this big pile of money that could be a problem if good news comes along with respect to lower costs than anticipated in projects.
Yeah, and I'll give you a good example. When I had the slide up about the stadium project at 6.6 million, through the valued engineering approach that we took, we actually were able to bring in all the actual costs we're assigning to the project that you're approving at about 6.2 million. We have contingency built into the project. Now, if everything goes smooth and there's no change orders and there's no unforeseen conditions, and we could end up bringing the project in at that number, and then we certainly wouldn't need to allocate an additional $400,000 or $600,000 to that project because we didn't need any of the contingency. If you go a bond route with a project, like happens a lot, you end up, at the time, you're going off the estimates that you're given, including the contingency, and say you borrowed 8 million and you brought the project in for 7.2 million, you're still going to pay on the 8 million because you took the whole 8 mil. It's a good question, so. Facilities guys, did I leave anything out?
No, I don't think so. But, we've been talking about this now for a while to put this together, and conditions have been changing over many weeks and had to readjust as you've been explaining. So I just want to acknowledge the work that was done by the administration on getting these proposals in with value engineering and be able to have as competitive a bid as practical, and also looking at different instruments, financial instruments, rather than just the typical. So thanks.
Okay, Madam President, if there's any other questions, that would conclude my presentation.
Thank you. Great work.
That concludes my report, Mrs. Reinhardt.
I had a few questions for the superintendent, if I could.
Oh, okay. All right, then. I'm going to have to open my.
Off of your report. Just a few questions, but I know you know the answers because I've had a discussion with you about this. But I do think it's in light of the comments here in the opening portions of our meeting tonight. I'd like to ask you maybe a few questions about the October 2021 email that was referenced by multiple speakers tonight, and I think specifically addressed in a FOIA from Mr. Scheinler, who I do appreciate over the last number of years has identified through that process, unfortunately for us, but unfortunately to sometimes our standing in the public, but to the betterment, I think, of this board and the district, that sometimes things are going on perhaps that not all of us are always aware of. But on this particular issue of the email of October 2021. Just some, I think, maybe straight questions that I think can dispel some of the issue. That particular email, I know Dr. Mann certainly, as Mr. Scheinler had indicated, came before your time here. However, I do think you can comment on, and I know we've discussed ourselves, whether or not this is the policy of Southern Lehigh School District. And as to two specific items in that email, one which I would just ask you, is it the policy of Southern Lehigh School District that teachers hide gender identity from parents? Is that a policy?
There's no board policy.
Okay. And is there a board policy that teachers use new names and pronouns without parent consent?
There is no board policy.
Okay.
Related to that.
And has this district, you would agree with me, there was an email that communicated those and
I
other
would
things.
agree with you. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to
And
take
then-
the fifth here any minute.
I know.
Mr.
And I'll stop doing this to you in
Okay,
a second. And I should say, I don't, that's not my intent.
No, I'm
because
teasing. I'm teasing.
It's not my intent, because I do know, as I started with, that this is an issue that you take very seriously.
It's an important issue.
It's an important
that's
issue. Yep.
worthy discussion.
So with that, however, perhaps you can, I'll stop my direct questioning of you and just ask you, has the district begun to take steps to educate and train district personnel on some of these challenging issues? And perhaps you can give us an update on that, or future steps that you think you can take with the direction, and I'll be quiet, that obviously, some members of the community, I think rightfully so, feel that this has been communicated, and I think are curious as to whether that has been somehow potentially corrected or will be corrected as to at least the intermediate staff over there at that school.
Sure. And what I've said, it's a challenging issue to discuss, because it's more than, for instance, we just had a discussion on finance, right? And finer points of policy and planning, and that's very important. But extreme caution is necessary in talking about these issues, because they are attached to real kids who each and every day are doing their very best and often are relying on the school district and their families. And very often, the student population that we're discussing is at high risk. As I think Mr. Carney pointed out, and I'm sure I'm getting my statistics from a different place, but LGBTQ students have 3 times the national dropout rate, 4 times more likely to commit suicide, 6 times more likely to have suicidal ideations. And so this is not a policy discussion out of context. It's a very real issue for students. And I like to think that we discuss this item as if students who are most affected are sitting in the front row. And so in light of those statistics, I think it's very clear and obvious to all of us, right, that the more that families are involved, the more that they're engaged, the better off we are in supporting the needs of our kids. That said, each and every student is different. Each and every circumstance is unique. And our efforts are to support the child and to support their families. And at each and every turn, to support the civil rights, which are substantial, of our students and of our families and also of our staff. And we are engaged in some really great conversations internally with our administrators. Had the privilege to meet with our counselors, K through 12, learned an awful lot, and talking about how do we best support our kids in this, right? And I would say, the formulation of Mr. McGinty's email, which he sent to the central office for review prior to sending it, all right, is not the model we're using to inform these discussions. All right. But in the same way, we also respect each individual child and their circumstances that they present to us in the guidance office. And so that is about maybe the best, perhaps not as direct as you would hope, but the best answer I'm able to give. But I also want to take the occasion, since it came up, to offer a point. And that is, regardless where anyone stands on this issue, I'm referring to bathrooms now, and I wouldn't try to convince people, of good conscience, feel very strongly on both sides of this issue. What I will say, all right, is that LGBTQ students are absolutely, positively no more inclined to an act of violence than any other student. And in fact, they are far more likely to be victims of violence. So when we look at this issue, regardless of where we fall, I think extreme caution has to be used in categorizing certain groups as having the potential to be more violent than others. And again, that's just a very important point for a very much at-risk population, or some at-risk population in our school, that I just think needs to be said. So, Mr. Demick, that's about as good as I can do in response to your question, and I'd be happy to take up more specifics offline.
Yep, no. No, I just wanted to point out, as I said, I knew your answers to them because I know we've discussed it, and I'm satisfied by, I think that your address to that and is the appropriate one. And your answer just now is, very satisfactory to me. I hope it's satisfactory to others in the board. I understand the desire by the public to have some type of remediation, and I suspect that you're taking steps to make sure that the guidance you just provided here is the guidance that ultimately will be provided to all staff in this district, and that they then better understand what their role is in this process. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Hunt, yeah, I want to thank you and reiterate that I appreciate you speaking of this to the public. And I think I had asked you last meeting, and Jess wasn't there at that meeting, but I wanted to see if you wanted her to potentially give some more guidance to our community with regard to the potential legal issues that were brought up.
Right, and I think they're substantial, and I think Attorney Moyer could do a far better job than I ever could in talking about them. So,
What specific legal guidance would you like me to relay here?
So I think a couple community members had mentioned that there was no precedent necessarily set by various legal cases in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Would you be able to touch base on any of particular
Sure.
legal cases that I know have made popular press to see, is there a precedent set
Sure.
in the
Sure.
Commonwealth?
Sure, and I heard a couple things. I heard that there is no law, and that is absolutely accurate. There is no law. But as I sit here in the seat as a solicitor advising the school board, we look at legal trends. And what we look at is case law that has come across not just the state of Pennsylvania, but countrywide. I know of the school district out in Lancaster. I know of no other school district in the state of Pennsylvania that has adopted a similar policy. I know of many school districts who have attempted to adopt a bathroom policy requiring students to use bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity, and they have not been successful when legally challenged. There are 3 cases, one that came out of the Western District, where there was a bathroom policy that was adopted. It ultimately settled in federal court, and the school district had to pay monetary damages to the transgender students, and the policy was reversed. There was another one out of the Middle District, and again, Title IX was interpreted as well as the Equal Protection Clause, and it was found in favor of the transgender student. An audience member here tonight referenced Boyertown, which was decided here in Easton in the Eastern District. That was the first case that was brought by cisgender students, who are students who relate to the gender that they were assigned at birth. Those students were not successful, and the court indicated that there was no privacy right to be having access to a locker room that you can't, a transgender student could be in the same locker room as a cisgender student. The important thing with that case, though, is the court said to Boyertown that they did a good job because they attempted to accommodate cisgender students who were not comfortable utilizing a locker room or utilizing a bathroom with a transgender student. So we look at those legal cases and we look at cases across the country. And there have been cases, and I'll concede that, where there have been school districts who have not told parents that they were utilizing different pronouns or names, and those schools have not been successful in different jurisdictions across the country. We look then towards the different agencies that interpret the various laws, and we have the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, which is a Pennsylvania state law that kind of goes with Title IX. So it prohibits harassment, discrimination on the basis of sex. And the PHRC, the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, is the governmental agency who enforces that law. And the PHRC has interpreted the word sex to include gender identity, sexual orientation, and has went on record of indicating that they will investigate any claim of sexual harassment, discrimination based upon gender identity and sexual orientation. We also look at the federal agencies, so Department of Education, Department of Justice have also set out recent guidance where they are interpreting Title IX, and they too are interpreting the word sex to be broad. And that includes gender identity as well as sexual orientation. So when advising the school board as to the best way to proceed, we have to advise them to look at the legal trends, look at the cases that have been decided in the state of Pennsylvania. Have these policies been successful? They have not. We have to look at the governmental agencies who have interpreted this and the possibility ramifications of those agencies coming in and finding discrimination. The school district could find themselves in the middle of a private suit, which could amount to monetary damages awarded to students, parents, or guardians. And also, if the DOJ comes in here and finds a violation, there is a risk of federal funding that could be lost. So I have very closely watched this issue come down probably since 2014, 2015. It has changed through the different administrations who have taken over. But these cases, I believe Doe was settled 2017. There has not been a case that has come out in favor of the other side. If there is, it's my obligation to advise the board of that and bring to you any new cases with regard to any policies that have been raised. But as we sit here today, other than the one school district out in Lancaster, I do not know of another school district in the state of Pennsylvania that has adopted a policy requiring bathroom usage that correlates with the gender assigned at birth.
And Ms. Ware, perhaps it would be helpful for the board to consider if in any federal civil rights case, an issue goes to court and the appellate court and all the way through, and the district is found to be unsuccessful, ruled against. There's this whole thing about what I understand to be prevailing party fees.
Sure.
Could you help describe the risk a district faces in being found to violate civil rights by a federal court?
Well, it's twofold. One, you'll be required to pay the prevailing party's attorney's fees. And then, as I indicated, there could be monetary damages that could be awarded to the students, parents, or guardians if it is found that there is a violation of civil rights.
And in the case of transgender students in bathrooms, it's been my understanding that insurance companies have been very reticent to fund or support districts that decide to head down that road, oftentimes or potentially leaving them without insurance coverage. Do you have any insight into interactions you might have with insurance companies and their willingness to fund such policies?
Dr. Mann, I've heard of that. I do not have any personal knowledge, but have, looking at these various cases, have heard of insurance companies that would knock back districts if faced with those suits.
I asked just one additional question. I appreciate that update on the current state of case law regarding that Title IX issue with the bathrooms. One other concern, I would like to hear your thoughts. And again, going back to that the email that was provided out by our district, one of the things I think indicated that teachers should utilize the names and the pronouns that are desired by the student. And again, that I think Dr. Mann just indicated that's not our policy. And my understanding is that there is sort of a pretty good split on that case law. And to Dr. Mann's point, which I want to kind of point out in his statement, is that the civil rights of both students, parents, and he said staff will be respected. And my understanding is that there's certainly case law that would support the idea that a teacher or any staff in the district, against their good faith religious beliefs, would not be required to use a pronoun that would violate their own personal beliefs. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, Attorney David, it is. So nothing in Pennsylvania. So no cases in Pennsylvania, but cases in other jurisdictions, and they are split, where personnel, employees have brought cases raising various individual issues, religious issues, of not wanting to utilize the pronouns, names, whatever that correspond with a student or somebody else's gender identity, gender expression. And the jurisdictions are split. Some have found in favor of the employees and some have found against. I think the big thing here is, in what Dr. Mahan said, there's no like check the box. You know, each student is different. Each circumstance is different. You know, you can have young children, you can have older children. The best thing that you can do is take every child and assess the needs based upon he or she that is presented in front of you on that particular day, taking into consideration, you know, of course, there's a family that's sitting at home that is going to be impacted. But our recommendation has not been to adopt a policy saying, okay, well, if this box is checked, then okay, you can use the name, because each student is different and you may not be able to check the box every single time. But understood and agreed. Personnel also, employees also have to be taken into consideration.
And quick follow-up on the payouts.
Mm-hmm.
What type of dollar figures are we talking?
Thousands, upward thousands.
Thousands or hundreds
Hundreds
of
of
thousands?
thousands, how about
Or
that?
millions?
Mhm. I'm not aware of anyone in the millions.
Okay.
But let's say six figures,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you have multiple children who come together and bring the suit, and then attorney's fees on top of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Mann? Okay, let's move on to, I guess we have special education student services. And that, Dr. Trinkle is going to speak to curriculum, student and staff services.
Yes, I would like to have the board consider a motion for the approval of the Karen Foundation services for the 22-23 school year. And this would be to approve the letter of agreement for services for 3.5 days per week, which would be about 23.5 hours a week from the Karen Foundation to GPLIS, Southern Lehigh Middle School, and the high school. And this will be covered under grant funding, which is our one of two grant funds through PCCD. So there will be no cost to the district for that.
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Can I,
Anyone opposed?
not
Okay.
opposed, I'm saying aye. I just had a quick question. I just didn't quite turn it on fast enough.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Trinko, for that explanation. My question would be, is this due to finding additional funding that would cover this, or is this due to additional need? And if it is due to additional need or grant funding, whatever the answer is, when that funding goes away, is it anticipated the position will be continued? How long is this in place and for what purpose, and is it demonstrate additional need, that kind of thing?
It's actually been in place in the previous school year through grant funding. And this grant will it's split between two grants to extend into the 2024 school year. So it'll give us 2 years within this contract. And then we'll continue to assess the needs moving forward. Typically, I think in the past, and I wasn't here for the last year, but I believe it was covered under grant funds. Similar may have been ESSER, not PCCD. but
That
we
was my
split
que-
it
yeah.
through two to extend it for 2 years.
That was my question.
Yes.
Because of the shift in funding source, I wasn't sure if it was an additional service or a continuation of just being continued to be funded through grants.
It's a
Thank you.
continuation, actually.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. A continuation of current services. Appreciate it. Thanks. And my vote was aye. Sorry to interrupt that process. Thanks.
Just a real quick follow-up. What was the name of that grant? I'm sorry.
It's PCCD. It's the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency.
Thank you.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that's approved.
The next item is the Beata contract, which was discussed previously at our previous meeting. This is just, we actually have the contract in play. It's just the motion to formally approve that Beata contract for nursing services, which would be outside of just the one-to-one services that we currently have, which will provide some support to our buildings needing nursing coverage.
Second.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, the Beata contract is approved.
Thank you.
Technology?
We have to vote.
We have to
Oh, I'm
vote.
sorry. All in favor? We're going too
Aye.
fast. Anyone opposed? Okay, that's approved. Technology, do you want to present that, Dr. Mann?
Thank you, Mrs. Reinhardt. We request the board to approve the E-rate grant agreement with Lincoln Intermediate Unit Number 1 as contained in the attachment.
So just a quick question, because you had mentioned, I know, some details earlier. I just held my question. You mentioned March, so the timeline for the actual conveyance of this part will be in March, but we're going to keep the ball rolling with respect to ordering parts that are needed. That was my impression. I just wanted to confirm that.
Yes.
Because of the delay and because
Yes.
it takes a while, obviously, to get things right now.
I think we will receive.
I didn't
So
understand the
here's what I have.
March. Yeah.
We're going to approve this tonight. I would request the board to approve tonight. We're going to have our application posted in January. Notices will be out in February. We would anticipate formal approvals in March. The supply chain, we would expect to allow us to implement in the summer of 2023.
Okay.
But we are moving full speed ahead as quickly as we can, and we will only be slowed by supply chain issues.
Right, but our short-term solutions that you'd already been working on have been
Have been holding the
successful
fort
so far.
up till now.
I
Yes,
just
they
wanted to
are.
double-check.
And so I think, and I will also say,
is
just
more the
while we're on the
long-term.
topic, our tech tickets are down substantially. We are, I don't want to say all caught up through the work of our department. We are in a much, much better place right now than we were. And we also are looking to expand our staff in
Okay.
light of a recent vacancy, but that's well beyond the scope of your question. So,
No, but I appreciate it because that was my follow-up question. later,
okay,
so
all
that's
right
good.
then.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question as well? Thanks for that. That
Sure.
ties, you mentioned the tech tickets, and this approval of this payment addresses systems like the internet, for instance. It doesn't specifically address individual pieces of hardware, because I'm glad to hear about the tech tickets, because I know there was kind of a shortage of
Yes.
devices of things. If a laptop was down, there was difficulty in supplying the students. So this won't be purchasing additional laptops or materials to fill
No.
that gap. In that regard, we're filling that gap through getting our tech tickets down under control, hiring additional staff, as you said just now,
No.
or replacing a staff member.
We are, we're realigning the department in the hopes of having an assistant tech director, having reduced it. But this is very much a hardware purchase, but not computers per se.
It's the
There are
network.
switches and access points.
Okay.
We think that by having this in place, our maintenance issues will go down because the internet will be working a lot better. And our tech tickets are down because people that we do have are working really hard to get it there. So, it's a good combination of a lot of different things. And so, we're
Yeah.
moving in a good direction here.
Thanks. And do we anticipate additional system network needs? I know there was a big drop off between prior year and this year with just network connectivity difficulty. Have
Right.
we pinpointed what that issue is and why there's the sudden change from last year to this year, and if we anticipate that going forward, or did we pinpoint what that was so we know what the problem was, and so we know this is addressing it, or is it?
The problem, as we have identified it in our estimation, is that the switches were well past their expected life and were failing a bit, right? Then the access points were also past their extended life, and I think you're only like an access point would typically have maybe 40 computers attached to it, accessing the internet from that access point. We had upwards of 50, 60, 70. So we were using more capacity than was available from the access points. The combination of the switching and the access points was making our content filter just unworkable. And it was identifying every effort to access it filter as being denied because the internet was too unstable. And so we believe that addressing the switches that were well beyond their life and renewing and increasing the amount of access points will completely eliminate the issue of disruptive internet that was the precursor to the content filter pretty much shutting everybody down. And
Gotcha.
again, we did a workaround as far as migrating some of the internet content to different servers, but that was kind of a stopgap solution as we prepare for this larger project.
So that sudden change was kind of the equivalent of the light bulbs going out or the fuses kind of blowing all at the same time.
Well-
And that was that sudden kind of, they were past their useful, life. And
Yeah.
that explains why that suddenly changed.
Yeah, and I also think to the great credit of our professional staff, we're relying more and more than
Yeah.
ever on technology. And so,
Yeah.
which is a really good thing, but the infrastructure that was in place maybe in 2018 is just not working in 2022 for age and capacity issues.
Thanks for that explanation.
And if I can just jump on to that for 1 second.
Speak
Really
into the
what-
microphone, Mr. Pepe.
I'm sorry.
Community can't hear you.
What it really comes down to is the superintendent's talking about core infrastructure upgrades. So the infrastructure is already in place, but a lot of it needs to be upgraded in order to handle the bandwidth of what is being fully utilized now. With the E-rate, that gives us the ability to save 40 cents, 40% of those costs. That's why that's so critical to get on board with the E-rate. The other part of the equation is like the virtual servers and data center upgrades. And that's all part of the holistic approach. The tech director is working with the superintendent, and also that comes back into budget when we're talking about capital needs.
Right.
So this all rolls back up into the same thing. And in this case, seeing where we currently are, what we need to do to make the improvements that are necessary to benefit us, not just now, but into the future.
Great. Thank you very much.
And so we're estimating that this will cost under $200,000, 40% of which will be underwritten by federal grants. And our next project after this one, as Mr. Pepe points out, is getting a data center. Where currently we have like iron servers all over the place, and we're maintaining them every which way. So we need to develop a core central data center that will kind of virtualize our operation. It will improve our security here. It will reduce our maintenance costs. It will ultimately reduce our long-term costs. And but that's like the next project we'll be talking about. But so tonight we're not on the data center, but that will be our next engagement and discussion as we try to, just as we're upgrading the facilities, we have to upgrade our technical infrastructure because that's very much a core component of instruction these days.
Yeah, thanks for that explanation and just identifying where this puzzle piece kind of fits in that grand plan. Appreciate it.
Lots of good work there. Okay, do we have a motion? Second?
Second, do you need one? Second?
Yes. Any other questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, that's approved. I'm going to take 8A through D, which is business and finance, for a motion for all of those items listed.
Second.
Okay, and does anybody have any questions or comments for Mr. Pepe?
I had a quick question. Just the treasurer's report is great. I like that you have the top 10 kind of like sources of expense, I guess, so to speak. But it just reminded me because I saw a lot of charter schools again listed because I know that's a major source of cost for us. And I know we've had discussion in the past about, targeting those families for perhaps to try to draw them back in if possible. And so I just didn't know if we'd been able to with everything else going on, if there had been any. I just wanted to re-ask about it.
We have continued our outreach. We haven't been as successful as we would have
Okay.
liked, but we have and continue our outreach. What we did do is significantly decrease our Spartan Academy enrollment numbers to kind of offset that a little bit, and it's kind of maintained around 11 or 12, which is significantly lower than we had last year.
Okay.
But we continue our outreach.
Thank you.
Dr. Trinkle, real quick, just to follow up on that, do you notice any trends or is there any specific themes that that we've looked into that as to maybe why we weren't more successful with bringing families back?
Not that I can say right now that I see anything, kind of in your face as a theme or anything like that. No. But we continue to focus strategically at our high school because of the amount of programs we have academically, and really tried to hit that hard, especially over the summer, to bring some students back.
Are the majority of the students in the high school, or are they
That is a
younger
larger
students?
larger number.
Larger
yes.
on-
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Larger number.
Thank you.
Just one question about, in the spirit of looking at some of the subscriptions and software that I know you all did a great job at analyzing those, but I did see one on here, MSDS Online Incorporated, where I believe you're probably using that as a clearinghouse for the chemical compatibility and safety data sheets. I just wondered, it's about $5,000. I don't know if that's an annual cost or what have you, and if that's being utilized. I thought maybe it would be one to look into. There probably aren't too many in the way of MSDS sheets here, some, but
Yeah, that's typically part of the annual look when the OSHA and Right to Know, the material data safety sheets, and that would really be Mr. Rohrbach's area. But typically, from my experience, every year you need to make sure that you're compliant,
right.
and you have somebody that you're working with, the outside party, to help manage all that information and prepare all your MSDS sheets. And that also goes into cafeteria as well, not just for facility, but it's science, it's the
Chem
facilities,
labs are
nursing,
sometimes come
chem
up.
labs. Yeah, it's holistic throughout the district.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, those motions carry. Support services, and I guess we would ask Mr. Pepe to present this.
Sure. Under support services, we have a couple of items. We'll start with, the first one is the athletic field scoreboard and game clock. That is one that, again, has been months in the workings, and it actually started closer to $269,000, I believe. And finally, we did a comparative analysis of other equipment and really narrowed it down to two particular providers. Daktronics is the leader in the market with this. This is on a cooperative bid. This also has a lot of elements to it that are really great for the district, starting with the student curriculum package to allow our students to get involved in utilizing, managing, and operating the equipment. And it's also a digital scoreboard, which allows us to bring revenue in for advertising and marketing. And there's a marketing package that comes with that and marketing assistance that comes with that. At the end of the day, it really broke it down to the other component was we have a major donation from our partnership with St. Luke's that will cover about $215,000 of the purchase overall. The balance really comes down to sound system that we currently do not have in the overall package. We have some speakers on top of the grandstand that are going to end up needing to be replaced or improved. With this opportunity, it's all embedded into the scoreboard. So that was probably one of the final pieces that we had to look at in the overall. And the other part that I think was pretty significant when we were looking at this particular vendor is it's actually integrated with the Musco sports lighting that we've already agreed on. So since they're the other leader in the industry in the area of lighting. So it was a comprehensive operation review that probably took a couple of months to narrow down to what is really in the best interest of the final determination for a display of that type.
I have questions. All right, let me just pause here. I'm going
Go
to
ahead.
take 9A through C. So any questions related to the motions contained with regard to the signage, the lighting, and the schematic drawings?
Yes.
We
Yes.
can talk about, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think Kyle was first.
Yeah.
Well, just
So-
on that point though, I would not, I would prefer to take,
The drawings separate.
For the votes.
I would take that.
Take them
scoreboard
separately.
separate.
You want the scoreboard separate? Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
All right. So I was under the assumption that before the board was presented scoreboards, fields, anything for final approval, that we were going to have at least some sort of a presentation or, like I would have liked to have known what were the options. Like this is the one that you're presenting us with and telling us that we need to vote on, but what were the other options? Were they better? Were they worse? I would have liked to have
Yeah.
seen them and seen the costs that were associated with them, but we weren't really given that opportunity. Same with the field. I just assumed we would get some kind of a presentation of some nature. Like I'm not saying that this isn't the best. This may very well be the best situation that you're presenting us with, but I wouldn't know because I have absolutely nothing to compare it to. And I thought we were all going to be involved with the final decisions before it got to here it is to approve. Like I don't even know what I'm approving. Like yeah, I saw the pictures and all of the renderings and stuff like that, but I don't know how comfortable I am approving a scoreboard for $263,000 when I haven't seen any other scoreboards.
Yeah, let me kind of give you a little more detail, and maybe that will be helpful. Starting, first of all, we were looking at what is the most popular size for a high school market. Again, that it's appropriately sized for the field, so that we're not getting something too big and we're not getting something too small. So we were looking at one point as small as like a 19-foot board. We were looking as high as a 32-foot board. We kind of narrowed in on the 25-foot, which is the most popular sold for high school markets. There was a lot of comparisons of other districts who already have gone with digital display. So we were trying to compare apples to apples. Outside of Daktronics, the best runner-up that we came up with was Nevco. And they were also on the Sourcewell, as well as Buy Board Cooperative Purchasing. And we also looked at a sign that was put up in Nazareth, and that was through Fast Signs. So the difference in just starting with the video display, they're all basically the same size, the 25-foot width. The Daktronics was running 199,800. The Nevco was 158,819. The one through Fast Signs was 297,000. So right there, you're sitting there saying, well, that's like a $40,000 differential. Why? But then as you start going down, the ad panel is 2,900 for Daktronics versus 3,900 for Nevco. The arch truss is 7,800. The arch truss is the part that goes over the top versus Nevco was $11,000. Fast Signs, everything was just rolled up into one large number, which include a lot of markup because they're not actually manufacturing it. The speaker sound system I talked about was $48,805. That's for a 15,000 HD, which includes 10-channel analog mixer, cables, and laptop with MP3 interface. Now, so it sounds like a lot, but again, the committee took their due diligence in going through. We had the reps provide information. We had our facility director going through a lot of the proposals, and so did I. We compared that to what Nevco was putting out, and they were putting out a 1000 HD Pro, which is actually one step down from the Daktronics, and yet they were putting that in their package at $47,181. So there wasn't a big increase for so much more of what we're getting in that respect. Delay of game clocks, pretty much standard, 4,800 to 3,400. Shipping was 5,500 for the Daktronics. Nevco was 4,000. Well, why the difference in the shipping? Because one's coming out of North Dakota, the other one's coming out of Illinois. So that ended that. The extras with the Daktronics, which really kind of made the recommendation, is the curriculum package. The production curriculum package is included in the overall price. And that is also a content studio comes with that, display studio, a DAC video system, basics, etc. That's not available from any other provider of scoreboards. So once you get to the point where you've decided, if we're going to do a digital display, this is the group to work with. They also provide certification with Crew Connect for internships for students and college-based admissions and scholarships. They actually have an internship with the Iron Pigs. That was one of the selling points that they were putting out there. We would certainly expect our athletic director to look into other opportunities, but that was just one that they had mentioned because it's in the area here. The other part that's really critical with this recommendation is the sports market program. That's included in the overall price. The curriculum package is worth about $7,500 is what we ballparked it at. The sports marketing program, from my perspective as a business manager, and I think the superintendent agreed, is priceless. Because what it does is it ensures we don't have a really nice video display out there that's not generating the ads because none of us are marketing specialists. And not only do they help with the marketing, but they also help districts with what is the going rate? What should you be charging? How do you market? You know, and all of that assistance would go to the athletic department. The warranties, when we started off, was a 5-year versus Nefco had a 7-year. We used that as leverage to move Daktronics up, and they honored the 7-year warranty. The startup system was pretty much standard. They're both going to provide a certified technician. So on game day, to make sure it works, at least the first time when they're out there. The other thing was, by keeping the size to 25, it reduced the need for another I-beam. If you go higher, then you need to add another I-beam in the construction. So with that said, and we also did our due diligence with checking with other districts and other, high schools that have these type of game clocks and display units. And everybody keeps coming back to Daktronics for that reason. So at the end of the day, if the district wants to go that direction, that's really the recommendation. I hope that helps a little more information.
It does, and I appreciate it. And again, this may very well be the best solution, but I will again go back to, like, was there a non-digital display scoreboard that we could have chosen? And so we chose to go digital. What were the extra bells and whistles, other than obviously the fact that it's digital? What were the other bells and whistles that came with it? Like, I would have, I wanted to be told what was what was going on before it was presented to say, hey, this is what we're doing. I don't know how comfortable I am with it, being that I haven't seen the other, I've seen nothing. And again, if these are the recommendations, that's great, but I would like an explanation of what brought the facilities committee to these recommendations.
As the facility chair, I'll speak to one. Certainly, any of the board members are welcome to attend the facilities committee, which the agenda is published. And these discussions, the primary driver for the digital display and Daktronics is twofold. One, the ability to use it as a marketing and as a revenue source, and to sell ads that will be displayed on the board. Daktronics is clearly the leader in not just the product, but the support that they will afford us. The non-digital boards, there was not a substantial savings in those boards to give up the revenue that you could generate with a digital board and basically pay for not just the replacement of the board in time, but also generate additional incremental revenue each year coming in by the ads that are going to be displayed. And if you think about even non-ad type of placements, graduation, parents will be able to put something up on the board to recognize their graduating student. Other things like that can be done throughout different types of events that will be held in the stadium. The other thing that Lou's spoken to is these boards from Daktronics and the program package being exactly the same, regardless if it's a high school, a college, or a professional sports organization. They're all the same package. So the students who work on the programming here will have a marketable skill to go work for the Iron Pigs, to go work for the Colorado Rockies, or any other team. And again, Daktronics being the leader, a lot of opportunities for them to take the skills that they learn here and do something with them after graduation. So,
Well, I guess kind of what part of what I want to know is how many of these things were needed and necessary and how many were nice to have things, and what was the justification for deciding that the nice to have things needed to go on the list?
anything that's priced in what Lou went over just now as a nice to have. It's part of the standard package. They just break it out as things that you have to do to install the board and utilize it.
Dr. Sri.
So thank you for those explanations. I think that was helpful just to understand the background. So a couple of questions with respect to the cost and, what I saw within the proposal itself. I'm glad you mentioned the St. Luke's part of it because I do remember that as a member of the previous board that we approved the contract with St. Luke's, and I thought I remembered the scoreboard. A few of us were talking about it, that it included a scoreboard. So is there a set amount that they would set aside? I'm assuming based on what you said, they will not give more than that amount that you meant, 210, you said?
There's actually a scoreboard agreement that the district has with St. Luke's in the amount of $85,000.
Okay.
Then there's also an annual contribution for $65,000. And what we did is we looked at the prior year's contribution and the current year's contribution and checked with the auditor that we are able to utilize the multi-years. And he said, absolutely. So what we would be doing is taking and leveraging the 265s and the 85 to get $215,000 towards the total cost.
Okay. Okay, and then
Jump on that real quick for you. Please, just give me one second.
You go first,
Okay.
please.
I'm sorry.
I know, I can
Jeff,
see
I'm
your
next.
side, but I have something too, but you go first, yeah.
I just want, just on that one
Yeah.
issue, because I had the same.
Yeah.
When I heard 215,000 being paid by St. Luke's, I was like, okay, I'm probably on board now. But and you're good, Lou. But let me just make sure, because you're coming at me with the New Jersey math sometimes. So. What amount is definitely dedicated to a board by the St. Luke's contract?
85,000.
85,000.
Right.
So these other funds outside of the 85,000, could they be used on something else?
Yeah, that was
Okay,
my question.
that's my
yeah.
question. Thank you.
Absolutely.
The other,
So-
And I'm
No,
as you know, I'm
I know.
joking with you.
But just so you know,
But I just want to.
ultimately, the recommendation is from the committee.
Right.
not from the
Right.
business administration.
Yep.
no, I know.
You
It's
can determine, I don't care what sign you put down there. If you want to put a regular sign down there for $39,000.
no, I know.
Or if you want to do a display, the bottom line is, once the philosophical discussion of, are we going to utilize a display unit for a scoreboard? Then you're going to end up coming out with the recommendation that I was explaining
Right.
to.
And when
So-
just the questions about the contracts, as you mentioned, the service component too. So it's 1 year of a warranty, and then it's 7 years of service for parts, correct? Meaning they replace the parts that might go bad
No,
within
it's,
7 years?
They moved it up to 7-year on the scoreboard.
Right.
I
But
think the 1 year
it's
was just the sound component.
just the sound. So then the
Yeah.
7-year warranty, because I mean, sometimes, and I'm sure you've looked into this, but I just want to make sure I know, is that sometimes it includes just the parts that need to be replaced, and sometimes service doesn't include the actual visits made by a representative to actually fix said part. So does it include everything?
They
Because the hourly rate can,
Right.
add up.
The way it was represented to us is it would include the service. So in other words, if it's under warranty, they come out, they have local reps, I think he said in the eastern area, in the Allentown area. So we're not putting people up in the hotel overnight. And they're not, he said basically, if there's a problem or a breakdown, we would put a ticket in just like we do with any other technology. And we asked about response time
Right, yeah.
because, and they gave us examples of somebody's board that went down and they had a big event that Saturday and the guy was there and they flew the parts overnight and fixed the thing. It's like anything else. They tell you you got a 7-year warranty.
Right. So I guess my other question then would be, have we looked, because we did have previous discussions here as a group with respect to sponsorships. So whether or not we accept, the amount that's definitely set aside for from St. Luke's for the scoreboard, plus the additional fees that, could clearly go to something else, right? Even if we add up all of that towards the scoreboard, there's still a differential of
and
about 40 to 50.
Right.
So
And the only thing is the ads are
Correct, but-
prospective, in the future.
Right.
And just.
And I get that. I mean, I
back
think it's
to
a
the-
good
Back to the question you had asked, the $65,000 could be applied to any other element of the stadium project.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's kind of like trading one cost over another.
So-
We were simply looking at the availability of revenues that are dedicated to the athletics.
Right. I mean, I
that
know,
could
and I think
cover
that's
this.
smart to have ads serving as future revenue. I do think that's a good idea. I guess my question though is for now, because it's on the agenda as this set amount, what I would have liked to have seen, or what I'm hoping to see, I guess, is, a breakdown of additional sponsors to help make up the difference, because there's
Right.
also lighting on here, which I'm assuming that wasn't incorporated in
No.
our initial budget too.
Right.
So things are starting to add up that are,
The lighting's an element of the stadium, so you're gonna,
so that's already built
right.
Yeah,
into
the
what we
lighting, the lighting
approved.
was
Right.
okay.
That's
And-
what okay.
And the reason the lighting's on tonight is it was actually approved, but the wrong amount was approved.
Okay.
So
And
we
what's the
have to,
differential?
I was actually able to get them to bring the price down
Excellent.
because of the way in which it was sent over to
Okay.
us. Because we approved the tax-free or the tax-exempt portion, but it was set up for the contractor, not for the district.
I appreciate
So-
that
Yeah.
clarification. I guess my question is, where are the sponsors? I know
Well,
we've
and
had
that's-
some discussion regarding some interest, and I just want to make sure we see that through before we approve a large amount of money for
Right.
something that I think looks very nice. I mean, I agree. It'd be nice to have graduation in our stadiums. To have something like this, I do think that would be very valuable to
Right.
us as a community.
No, I agree. I agree with actually the sentiments that are being expressed. The problem we ran into was, well, first, we've had informal but serious inquiries about how do we sponsor, right? Now, the problem that we experienced, that I experienced, was I don't know how to price, like how much for a block, for what this looks like and how the thing works. And so, I was hesitant to say, okay, you can get like a quarter block for so much money for so much time, which is why I've seen great value in the Daktronics, in that their marketing will put together a plan for us to say, okay, school district, you could have 4 blocks along the bottom, and then typically in a district this size, it's $5,000 per block over a certain. In other words, we couldn't respond to people to sell them something because we didn't exactly know how to sell it. Now,
Well, can't we ask them for their advice now? I mean, because that's after the fact, right? I mean, I agree. I
Well,
get that that's helpful, but
yeah, the marketing.
I know they
Marketing.
probably don't want to give it to you for free, but
No, the marketing. And the problem is their marketing component does come after the fact.
Of
In other
course,
words,
yeah.
that's part
well,
of the.
but
the
that's
thing.
that's a bit of a chicken versus the egg
It
thing,
is
right?
a chicken versus the classic.
But
chicken
we
versus egg.
will have already approved the money,
We will
which
have
is going
approved
away
money.
from something else.
And this is and so the question is, I mean, I think for $40,000 you can get pretty much a scoreboard that will keep track of the score. Right? And it would, if we want a display, this is the display to get. I mean, that's just But the big thing, and it may pay for itself. And I've said, like, what if the lightning strike? I mean, I'm worried about cost and maintenance and everything that's being said. But so the core, but I am sympathetic to the idea this could make money. Could, but will it? We'd like to see signed in advance, but we couldn't pull that off.
Can't we ask for sponsorship without knowing exactly what they're going to gain in return? Just
Well,
knowing that
you
they're.
need to have a
People have been
plan in
saying
place
yes.
first, I think.
People said yes.
You need to have a plan.
Come
in
up
place.
with
Well,
a plan,
there's one
right?
other
Like,
thing
we
I
know
just
what the
wanted to mention.
differential is
Yeah,
cost-wise.
there's just one other thing I wanted to mention. I think this is all excellent discussions and really good questions. One thing we didn't touch base on, because we talked about having a basic scoreboard, and we talked about, and I actually brought up, I think, and Stephen, we had really good, robust discussion about a hybrid scoreboard where you have a display, which allows you to bring up the advertisement component, the video component, the educational component, but have a static one as well with maybe improved longevity, and maybe decrease costs. So we had really good, robust discussion. But one thing that why I got more on board with the video display was, our current display out there is just essentially for football. And that can be used for soccer and field hockey, but it can't be used for track. So with the video display, it allows you to really create a customized scoreboard, in addition to all the other benefits. But it really allows for track, for field hockey, for lacrosse, for soccer, and for football. We really talked about this being, multi-purpose field to see, really increased utilization by all the other sports. So I think that's been lost a little bit in some of the discussion, that the multi-purpose aspect of just the scoreboard itself, not in addition to
I mean,
the.
I'm
Chris,
not
that was
opposed. I like
exactly
that it's
what-
multi-purpose.
That was what I was looking, that
The
was
other- the other part of
very
that-
much what I
I guess
was
my
looking
only
for.
concern is, well, I think it sounds like a great option. I'm not disagreeing with it. I think it has some nice benefits that will give it some longevity too, right? Like, you don't want to spend money on something that's going to be outdated, or you're going to want something new within such a short amount of time that it was a waste of money, right? We've had that discussion before with building improvements, right? So I'm okay with something like this because it does sound like there was good discussion. When I agree, like with Mrs. Gangware, like we appreciate now being informed, because not all of us can make it to the facilities meeting, and I appreciate that, Bill. I know the agenda's posted, but I guess my concern is I want to know a plan with respect to how to cover the costs, because we do have a lot of issues and things that need money moving forward. And I know to me, and I brought this up before, it's not that anyone up here doesn't believe in education, we all do, but we weren't able to replace teachers at a certain cost, which I know is a replenishing, recurring cost. There's a difference. But to me, we weren't able to replace a certain number of teachers. I want to have good justification for spending this amount of money on a scoreboard, and at least knowing if we can take less out of our fund reserve, or take less of a loan, for example, I would feel better about it.
Well,
Anybody else have any comments or questions that hasn't spoken yet?
I do.
Go ahead.
Jeff, go ahead.
I said, one quick question. I share the same concerns. I agree with Dr. Mann's assessment that, you kind of go with what we, I guess, currently have out there, so to speak, or something like that, or you go up to this LED. I'm concerned, like Priya is, on the cost involved here, even with the offsets of the St. Luke contract and others. I guess wasn't when we talked to Nazareth and all these other Daktronic folks that currently use boards like this, did anybody ask at any point what the revenue was annually from let's say, I mean, Nazareth is about a pretty similar town, pretty similar sized place.
In the case of
'Cause
Nazareth.
that would make me feel a lot better.
Yeah,
if-
in the
okay.
case of Nazareth, they use Fast Sign. Fast Sign was what, 305,000 for the board itself?
I just want to, what was their revenue?
Well,
Let him
but
finish.
their-
Let him
hold on.
finish.
Bill,
For the
just-
revenue.
Wait.
I was just gonna add, their costs were about half of what we were.
Well, their
'Cause it was
costs
also a number of
were
years
over
ago.
6 years ago.
Yeah, true.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
that's,
it's about
Um,
300,000.
and
What's
and
the
the,
revenue stream?
the board at that time, I believe, was about $165,000. And based upon the Morning Call article, they paid the board off in 2.5 years, and they've been generating somewhere around $65,000 to $80,000 in revenue per year with a board that does more limited ads than what we might be able to do with the board that was recommended by Daktronics.
And that was one piece that I was going to add because Ms. Serene, you asked a good question, or Dr. Serene. When you talked about the advertising and the flexibility, because you reminded me when you brought that up about the sports, there's also a lot of flexibility in the advertisement capabilities that you would not have with a traditional board. So if you look at your anchor partners, that's like a sign that's stagnant, that's going to be at the bottom. And, that's going to cost a lot more for that type of an ad because it's constantly there. However, the digital display allows for ads during halftime, allows for a picture within picture to where, you can still be keeping track of what's happening. And yet all of a sudden a panel can come down the side, if you so choose to, for whatever the sport is that's happening, not just, again, football. They're very difficult they can throw out, things like that, what's worked in other markets. They don't necessarily know our market because they haven't tried to generate ads here. But I agree with you. I think Nazareth's pretty comparable. So that was good information. There's no guarantee, it's just like Dr. Mann said. It's a matter of first philosophically understanding this versus that. Because if it's just replace in kind, we got a quote for that. And then when the committees start to look at that, it's the same old that's down there. And it's really, you're pigeonholed into this sport or that sport, and that's what it is. So this is kind of an opportunity, but it can be multifaceted, and the advertising capability is there. But again, without the marketing team to help assist the athletic department, I don't think it would be as successful. So that was another reason why leaning towards the Daktronics. That's
Thank
all.
you. Just
Who
to
else would-
recap.
Go ahead.
Recap. Nazareth was 2-year payback and then had the revenues thereafter to the school district.
Steve, do you think that and I recall seeing that article, I think was kicked through. Do you recall when in that article or your information, when they say payback, is that payback for a $300,000 sign, or is that payback for maybe they had a partner that paid, maybe St. Luke's paid 200 of it and they paid off? Any idea on that?
They did not have a partner for the board.
Perfect.
The board was about half the cost at that time.
Right.
Keep in mind, had we done this 4 years ago, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, none of these costs would be what we're talking about today.
Right, but
So
put that
they
aside.
had,
But what
they
you're
had a
telling-
board under $200,000.
Right.
And
they paid it off in 2 years.
it
2 to
was
3
less
years.
than.
Right.
If I can't remember exactly in the article, but it was like 1.5 to 2 years. The board itself, the investment was paid. They since continue to generate revenue from the board, incorporating it into one of their tech classes where the kids were actually writing the code for the board.
No, I mean, I think all this is great. I just want to justify to the taxpayer. This is my bottom line. I mean, I admit, who wouldn't want to look at this as opposed to what's out there?
I think
So,
the
but
simple,
my point is, it's a 7-year warranty,
yes,
right? It's a 200 and almost, $2.75 million or $275,000 or so sign. Maybe in half the time of the warranty, certainly well in advance of the warranty ever running out, right?
Yeah, one of
Without,
one of the other points to that, because it's where your line's going, is we had discussion about what about replacement? It's just like turf field.
Right.
You have a time, you have a shelf life. So even though the warranty is 7 years, is it the expectation the board's going to be, broken or done or used up in 7 years? And the answer was no.
Okay.
Most of those boards are expected to be at least 10 years plus,
right,
depending on how they're maintained and whatnot. But each year, I would recommend taking a portion of the revenue and starting to budget towards replacement of the board. So at a future date, when you get to the point that you have to look at replacing the board, you're not starting from scratch again.
Can I just ask a quick question, just because you brought up maintenance? So I'm assuming there would be some kind of required maintenance for something of this caliber, right? So was there like weathering that you have to do, for example, like some kind of covering? Because I'm just thinking about bad weather, it does fine.
It's designed for
It's
outdoor.
designed
But is there
for
any
outdoor
increased
use.
cost for us maintenance wise at all?
No, it's
Could we do a future Phillies watch party on it?
Yes.
I think what I'm talking about with the maintenance is if a part goes, then they would have to come out and replace it. Okay, and whether it was in the warranty.
everything's covered.
Or outside of the warranty after the 7-year period.
Jeff,
Yeah.
just quickly to respond, I had similar thoughts to you. It's one of the reasons why I brought up the standardized scoreboard when we were talking about this with the cost aspect and the cost benefit. But when you started adding up all of the return on investment options with this, it seemed, and not to mention then the other funding opportunity with the sponsor, and then also just the revenue yearly, it just flipped my decision making on it
Yep.
for that reason.
No, that's excellent. I agree. Now listening to this, I mean, it does sound to me like this ultimately will make money. It's an investment that don't, and there's no guarantees, but I think the best estimate and certainly I always trust you guys and Mr. Pepe, is that I think this will make money for us in the end for the taxpayer for a really, and then for a really nice product. And I love to jump on these things to burnish my taxpayer, protecting bona fides. But I think in this case, it does appear to me, and I think we've done some good due diligence, a lot of good questions here tonight from people that are skeptical. But I have to say, I would like to vote against it, but I think, convinced me at least. Otherwise, I think it's a good investment for the district. I don't think
Okay,
it's
thank you,
extravagant.
everybody, for your questions
I
and
haven't had a
comments.
chance to speak
Just a
yet.
minute, Emily, just a minute.
Okay.
Mrs. Gaiman, I'll give you a second. Does anybody else besides Mrs. Gaiman have anything new or unique to add in terms of questions or comments?
I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for the excellent answers, and that Chris drove it home with I wasn't thinking of all the sports, and that's absolutely a very good case for having it, because I was wondering why would you have chosen one over the other, but
Thank you.
And
thanks for
quick
cutting me off.
point.
Thanks, Chris.
A quick point to that, as you're looking at the rendering of the field lines, all of the sports are represented there. You may not be able to see it in the schematics. They're all represented, but that was a key. Yeah. But the idea of this board is, one, it is appropriate to the sport being played or the event taking place in the stadium, but also even going back to the ad revenue, all of the sports through their booster clubs, if they want to go and raise funds directly, then the ads can be customized to that sport and so on. Where, as opposed to if you had a traditional board with fixed advertising around the board, it is what it is. So there's unlimited ability to go and generate revenue by sport, by event, etc.
Mrs. Gaiman?
Thanks. Yeah, I echo. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the answers. There's been a lot of good information. I just want to ask I want to ask one additional question I don't think has come up that we're going to have to consider as a board. And just to recap, we're talking about basically 3 different kinds of sponsorships and revenue streams. One is, Mr. Pepe mentioned the $250,000 that will be covered by St. Luke's. That's a sponsorship that was already acquired years ago as a part of this, the contract agreement we have with them when we're in year 2 of that agreement or something like. But that's something that was established years ago when the contract with St. Luke's was signed. That money was set aside already years ago. So that's one revenue stream of sponsorship. Then I believe Ms. Gangware and others brought up tonight, as a part of that building process, we've had people who are interested saying, I would like to donate funds toward this building process and this scoreboard, and how can I go about doing that? And a discussion of kind of those fixed, stagnant, I think Mr. Pepe's word was stagnant ads that are the same over time. So it would be another revenue stream. And those 2 forms have already kind of can be decided, or it's a once and done decision. A sponsorship with St. Luke's, we have a great partnership with them. The secondary sponsors, part of the building process, you decide once, who is your sponsor going to be? They are approved for how much, and here's the stagnant ad. The third aspect, which seems to be the most appealing in a way, is the ongoing changeable advertising capability the board has. And my question, just to pose as we make this vote on this capability, with, what is it, Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility. This is a pretty powerful thing we're doing to gain advertising revenue and also to put that in front of our students in our community. And my question would just be, as a board, just as we move forward with this and other funding, are we prepared to monetize and advertise within our facilities and our classrooms? And to what degree are we willing to monetize and advertise? And how, as a board and as a community and as a district, will we decide what kinds of ads go up and who that policy of approval? It's just something to consider and think of, because this conversation, I'm dating myself here, but I was in school, middle school, high school, whatever, when the advent of Channel 1 brought televisions to every classroom across the nation. You get a free television in your classroom to use with education. If Channel 1 network also got to advertise its morning news program with all of its ads about, Stridex and pimple pleasing and the lipstick of choice and the guy, what Vans, whatever. And if you'll recall, people who are my age, there was a controversy with that of the day. And it was the concept of introducing and monetizing our classrooms. And what messages are we putting before our kids and who gets to decide? Now, I am by no means comparing an ad for pimple cream to parents paying to say happy birthday to their kid on a scoreboard. I am by no means making that comparison. But it is something, when we choose to vote on this, it is something that we have to consider is going to now be an ongoing kind of a thing we have to decide and think about. I'm not against it. I think it's a great opportunity. I'm going to vote yes. But it just made me think of Channel 1, and it made me think of other board discussions I've been in this room over the years. And there's been great debate at many different times of, do we put in, a bulletin board ad in our gymnasium that stays there while elementary kids have classes in there? Or is it a removable poster that comes down after the basketball game is done?
Okay,
And
Mrs.
that's
Gaiman,
my only, that's
thank
my.
you. Thank
You're
you
welcome,
very
you're welcome.
much
I was
for
I was
your
concluding.
comments.
I was concluding. I
Okay.
appreciate you letting me talk, but that is my question and concern. I vote with concern on
Duly
this.
noted. Duly noted. Any other questions or concerns
I would just,
on the scoreboard? We're just going to take that motion.
a quick comment on that. The board can be shut off. There's no ads. It's that simple.
Yeah. The board can be shut. I just meant during games and who gets to decide and as an ongoing. And also, this kind of does open up the question of, if this is such a great funding stream, where else do we put it in our classrooms, in our gymnasiums, and in our hallways? And it just,
As I
just
said, it's
opens that
duly
door.
noted. Let's take a vote. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is anybody opposed? Okay, the scoreboard's approved, Mr. Pepe. I will take 9, B, and C together. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Okay, does anybody have any questions on the field lighting and the schematic drawings?
I need to describe one thing about the first one, the field.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it looks as if you're approving $350,000. What happened is the board already approved $343,168. At the time, the way the proposal read to us, it said non-taxable. So that's the amount that we put on the agenda, because we do not pay taxes. However, the actual cost was $358,988. And the reason why it was set up that way is they expected this was going to the vendor, not to the school district. So I went back and explained to them that they really didn't represent it very well. And while I understand I'm not pleased, they were able to drop the final price from $358 to $350 as part of their, mea culpa. The only thing that you need to understand with the taxable portion, just so you understand how this worked, because it was a little bit new to me, was because we're a public school district, we don't pay tax on anything. If this had gone to the contractor, they would have to pay tax on the portion that's considered permanent, which would be the footings that are poured into the ground. So that's why there was a differential to begin with. So all we're doing is simply appropriately approving the final amount, which has come down to 350 from 358,000.
Lou, can you also comment? I believe they also threw in the show lighting as
Yes,
well.
yeah,
And
that
what
was
was
the other
that cost? Because we originally did not choose that as a cost savings measure.
I think that was around $9,000 or something like that. No,
Oh,
it was way
65,
more.
it was
Yeah,
65,
It was a
I
lot
think
more.
It was not the total 65, but it was in the magnitude of 40-something thousand
pretty big,
dollars. And they were pushing it and back to the discussions with what's all in here, what's not in here. It was determined that would be a nice to have, but not a need to have, especially at that price, so we declined. And after ongoing, he kept explaining that it's really good, you really want this. I said, well, then why don't you just give it to us? Because Southern Lehigh is going to be a really nice feather in your cap as far as when the stadium's done. So I kind of bartered it out.
Good
So
job.
that's included too.
And it integrates with the scoreboard too.
Yeah.
Which was the key reason that when they heard that we were going with Doctronics, I think that motivated them a little bit to include it and Lou leverage that, which is great.
Take
Mr.
Lou.
Deming?
I'm
Thank
gonna
you,
take
Lou, for
Lou
that.
to take my next car purchase. We could probably rent them out for revenue. The only question I had about the schematic drawing of the, and I apologize, I remember looking at this on the computer, and I thought it, and tonight I'm too lazy to open that up, so I'm looking at this black and
There
white.
you go.
I have it open on my computer.
I recall seeing orange, and I couldn't tell from even when I had the computer, thank you, whether the orange on here is mostly just because of the different field lines for, say lacrosse, soccer, different things. Are we putting any orange? I just
No.
abhor the idea of having, I don't know what happened to this
No,
orange
we're
thing.
not.
Okay, so it's all blue and white. That's our color.
Yeah.
Anything that-
And,
okay.
and what appeared orange may have been the soccer lines, which
Right.
are
That's
actually
what I thought.
red.
Okay.
They're red.
I just okay. I just want to make sure we weren't any of this orange piping nonsense. Okay, very good.
Our colors are blue and white. There's a sign on
I
the
agree.
outside of the gymnasium.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. That's my question.
I had a quick
Oh.
question about,
Sorry, the soccer's
Yellow.
yellow. The lacrosse is
Red.
So red,
Red.
yellow make orange. For
And
those of us who are.
boys
Men's
lacrosse is
blue.
blue.
Yep.
Steve's
Women's
scrolling like
lacrosse is
crazy
red.
here trying to
Field
get
hockey
the-
is black. Field hockey's black.
And the other thing to remember
Field
too,
and field hockey is black.
when you're looking at this, you're looking at the whole field condensed into this picture. When you're actually out there and the field's done and you're sitting in the stadium, you're not going to be able to differentiate some of those lines that the players on the field will. But it's a requirement for safety also of the game that the players understand where their lines and boundaries are.
I just had a quick question about, thanks for including the schematic on here. Is this, and I just can't tell when I log into Google Docs through Board Docs, is this available for the public to see as well, these drawings? Because when I click on this, it says
It will be
Emily
when
can
it's
see them,
approved.
but,
It will be once it's approved.
okay, so currently this on the agenda can't be clicked on unless you're given approval on,
You can. I think you can. Yeah.
the public can
Yes,
see?
it's
Okay.
available to the public.
All right, thanks, y'all. Okay, so you can see, I'm getting thumbs up. I appreciate that. Okay, so when it says Emily can see this because she's a board member, it'll also say Joe Public can see this because you can see who's, okay, great.
Yeah.
That was my question.
And
Thanks.
The guideline here was function over aesthetics to make sure that this comports to what's necessary for each sport.
Gotcha. Thank
Okay,
you.
let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, those motions carry. Mr. Pigeon.
I'm just tired listening to all that.
That's two. It's getting
So we
late.
have three policies that we're going to be discussing tonight. We are not voting on the policies tonight. I sent the policies to the board on Thursday evening, so everybody should have gotten a copy of these policies. Connor, you're going to pull those up for me? Here we go. So the first policy we're going to talk about is food service, 808. When you're looking at the policies, new language is in red. Any language that's not going to be included moving forward is struck through, so you can see it. So the first page of the policy, there's no changes to this 808. If we go down to the third page, starting right at the top, there's some minor changes, and that talks about the process for conducting the certification of individuals for student eligibility. So that's when they were occurring, when they will occur, so on and so forth.
May I interrupt? Who's making the revisions? Who made the revisions on the policy, the
This is from
recommendation?
PSBA.
So these were the
So-
black ink is our original policy, the red
Oh, I
is the
did that.
PS.
I took the PSBA version and I incorporated it with ours.
Okay, has it received solicitor reviews yet?
It has not. We're still
Okay.
discussing it, but it will go to the solicitor this week.
Okay.
Before the first vote,
Okay,
the first reading. excuse
got
me.
it.
Next section is accommodating students with special dietary needs. There is a struck out section there, and it's a repeat, so that's why it's struck.
Where is that repeat? Because I had that as listed as one of my questions, because the way that this looks right now is that we're going to start charging people that have special dietary needs, and I'm assuming that that's not the case.
It is not the
So
case.
where does it say that
It's
we are not
embedded
going
in
to?
the first part, saying the district shall make appropriate food service and meal accommodations to students with special dietary needs in accordance with applicable laws. Again, it's a repeat saying it again.
Okay, so we are not going to, because you
No.
struck out that we wouldn't charge them, so I'm making sure we are not charging anybody for,
As far as I know, we are not charging
Carry on.
anybody for that.
Carry on.
Food service safety inspections, the food service director shall post most recent inspections.
Could I just have a suggestion there? Could we say the food service director or his or her designee in the past, if that wanted to be assigned to another office staff, something written in the policy like this was troublesome because the policy that said that person had to do it. That was my only comment. Thanks. And my other question was, I didn't see it. I probably just missed it. But is there something in here about how if students, I'm just remembering from past policy discussion, students who are in arrears for paying for their lunches who do have to pay and aren't receiving free and reduced, I'm assuming that would also be a flag to look and see if they were in need. But those students who are in arrears will not be given like a cheese sandwich. They will be given a standard. Is that, where did I miss that's
That's
embedded?
towards the end.
Okay, thank you. Thank
But
you. I
yes,
just,
it is in there.
okay, great.
And it also speaks about how we can't make them do chores.
Right.
Or anything else for their meals.
I did see that.
I didn't see the chore part. I was, okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Appreciate it.
A few years ago, the laws changed in regards to student meals, and you can't embarrass kids or anything else. And that's what we're going to talk about here in a couple minutes. So it talks about school meal charges. Now it's changed to school meal services and accounts down towards the bottom of that page. And as we keep moving down, it says, who are we going to notify as a district? And we'll be notifying parents at least 2 times. We are allowed to have a conversation with high school students, grades 9 through 12, to tell them they're in arrears, but we can't do that in front of other kids or anything else. It has to be privately and, so that we don't embarrass the children. We're not allowed to take meals away from a kid once they get it, even if they can't pay for it. And we can keep reminding them, so on and so forth, that they need to pay and the parents need to pay. And we also need to offer them help and support in filling out any applications or anything else that might help them in that process.
Can I ask another quick question? Thanks for, you saw this was coming. The part about notifying a student, a high school student, would that be included under, for instance, if the student is going through the lunch line and the staff member sees that there's a negative balance, does the notification include the staff member mentioning at that point, hey, you're negative, or is that a separate, and should that continue to happen or should that not, or will it be a separate private conversation? Could you just classify what constitutes notification and if it will change any practices currently?
It says school staff may communicate a low balance or money owed by a student for school meals to a student in grades 9 through 12. Such communication shall be made to the individual student in a discreet manner. So going through the line to me is not a discreet manner.
Okay, that was my question. So that shouldn't be a practice
It should not be a problem.
currently or going forward.
Correct.
And it would not constitute notification because it shouldn't be happening. It wouldn't constitute the notification to the student that they
We would
may.
notify them in a discreet manner.
Yeah, okay.
Outside of that.
Okay, thank you.
The school district is prohibited from identifying or stigmatizing students who cannot pay, requiring students who cannot pay for school food program to perform chores, or requiring students or school staff to discard school food program meals after it was served. So that's all at the end of the policy. Collection of unpaid meal charges. Reasonable effort shall be made by the district to collect unpaid meal charges from parents or guardians. Efforts taken in collection shall not have a negative impact on the student involved, but shall focus primarily on the parents or guardians responsible for providing funds for meal purchases. Any other questions or comments about 808 food service? Hearing none, I'll add some corrections or some different language in there about the director, and then we'll have a first reading at the next meeting. Next is policy number 236.1, threat assessment. This one doesn't have too many changes from the current policy. So there's no changes on pages 1 and 2. Well, first of all, does anybody have any questions before I go through things?
Which one are we doing, the threat assessment?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the only change is at the bottom of page 3, except for like 1 or 2 words here or there. The district shall annually provide mandatory training for school staff on identification and recognition of student behavior that may indicate a threat to the safety of students, other students, or school employees or other individuals, school facilities, and/or the community, in accordance with law, board policy, and standards specified in the State School Safety and Security Committee. So that's really the only change to this policy from where we were. Questions about that? I can move that forward to first reading then next month. And then the last one we're going to talk about today is 805, school security personnel.
I did have a question on that one. Under definitions for it says school security personnel. It just lists school resource officers. Should we not be including like Upper Saucon Police Department? What if there's not a security
So again,
SRO
this is
available?
School security personnel, not for people outside. So the way PSBA had it outlined, they said, do you hire your own security? Do you hire your own police force? Or do you use an SRO? So we chose
Okay.
SRO because that's what we do.
Okay, no, I understand. That's fine. Sorry.
Delegation of responsibility, this basically falls back on the superintendent, that if a vacancy occurs as the school safety and security coordinator, the superintendent has 30 days with which to appoint somebody else for that role.
Who is our security or safety? Are a lot of these, when I read through this, it looks like there's a lot of additional jobs like that. It's a lot.
A ton.
Dr. Trinkle does a tremendous amount of work.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. She does a great job.
Can't we parse this out a little or something?
That's
Well,
what
that's
I
up
did.
to her.
I got it over there.
That would be up to Dr. Trinkle, and I'm not going to say too much more on that.
Kyle, thank you for pointing that out. I do want to acknowledge that Dr. Trinkle does an enormous amount of work, and the whole idea of threat assessment is critically important. She's done a great job organizing and putting this forth, and staying on top of it is a great challenge. So I do want to thank you, and thank you, Kyle, for pointing that out.
Moving down to number 3 on this policy, it talks about coordinating training and resources for students and staff, awareness and substance use awareness, identification and recognition of student behavior that may indicate a threat to the safety of students, other students, so on and so forth, as we already discussed. Number 7, coordinate school safety and security assessment with the school safety security grant requirements. Again, they're just adding some language on the legal requirements that have come out in the last year, Dr. Trinkle? Yeah. The school safety and security coordinator shall, within 1 year of appointment, complete required training as specified by the state's committee for serving the role of the school safety and security coordinator. Training shall be in addition to other training requirements for school administrators. So it doesn't replace anything. It's in addition to. Those are really the changes for 805.
Can I
Any
ask?
question? Yes.
Yeah, can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
Going back to the definitions, thanks for explaining why school police officers and school security guards are stricken, because you identified we have SROs, school resource officers. Could I ask, I assume that we have independent contractors and third-party vendors because those definitions are not stricken, or they are included? It was not my understanding that we did.
No, I don't think that we have used those, but we left them in there just in case we ever need to.
All right, I think philosophically as a district, I think we've placed a lot of trust in the community partnership. This is just me speaking here. I asked the question for a reason.
And when we're getting a new field and a new scoreboard now, who knows what we're going to have out there?
Yeah, so my question was, I know we place a lot of trust in that relationship between our community police officers and our SROs and that, but we don't currently, and Bill, I didn't mean to interrupt, do we? Oh, Bill, can you turn on your mic? I couldn't, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I heard what you said correctly, I didn't have the policy up in front of me to read along.
It just is definite, it says independent contractors and third-party vendors.
Yeah, we've had at different events, I'm trying to remember if it was for lacrosse games. I'm pretty sure at lacrosse games, and this was going back when Noah was playing, 2016 graduate, we had security personnel there that were private security, that were there to assist if there was an issue. And I can't recall if I've seen them at football games or other events, but periodically I have seen private individuals here to, help with any issue that might happen that were not Upper Saucon Police or SRO or other.
Okay, I can't say that I have, so if we could get a definitive answer on that perhaps by the next board meeting, just so we're all on the same page with that. I hear what you're saying, Bill, and I've seen folks, I didn't know if they were, security or not.
From a policy standpoint, you need to have some flexibility in there over time so that, if something does change, you're not pigeonholed and you've got to go to vote or something else in order to use that resource. That's my take on it.
I mean, I agree that having flexibility is good, but I think it would be nice to have clarification just because that's, if you're recounting from 2016, I'd like to know what we're doing currently, if we're actually utilizing it, because it doesn't seem like we are, right? Based on the reactions that were.
I think it's standard language across policy. In the event you need to move in the direction of utilizing a private vendor, maybe for a larger event that may have more individuals attend. It would just be a catch-all to cover that, so you wouldn't have to revise the policy. To do that.
But we're not currently doing this on a routine.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. That's
Would you need that in the policy though, for when we do graduation at Lehigh, for example, where they are having private security there?
Doing it would be in violation of your own policy.
Right.
Oh, I'm not arguing to remove it. I'm just asking, since it wasn't stricken, it looks like we have that. That is not my understanding. So I was just trying to receive clarification of, sorry, I didn't think that through before I asked. I was just asking, do we use these personnel because it's not stricken? And if we could just get on the same page with that, regardless of whether or not it's forward thinking and if needed in the future or whether it's current, that'd be great.
So just so the board's aware, I will be posting the policies on the public page this week for the public to review and have access to, but I'll be taking out the red and the stricken language, and we'll be making it a draft policy for the first reading on the 7th.
Okay, I think there needs to be another step in this process that we're missing. So the solicitor review and the edits by the solicitor, when will we see those?
If there are any edits, I'll present them to you at the first reading.
Okay, can you do that in a different color?
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions on this topic? Okay. And I believe that.
Well, we have the HR report now.
Oh, okay, let's do it.
So the HR report, it's posted online. It's slightly different this month. We're doing it as a link as opposed to a document on the actual agenda. There are 5 different areas to be voted on. Within those areas, there's obviously multiple different portions. So
Okay.
you'd like to have them all at once?
Yeah, so we need a motion to approve the HR report. Is that how we're moving forward?
second.
Okay. Any other questions or comments regarding the HR report? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, the HR report is approved.
Excuse me, I just wanted,
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead.
I just wanted to recognize Mrs. Holly Denofa is here, I believe.
Is she?
She has just been appointed as our new intermediate school assistant principal, and she has been joining us this evening. So I wanted to congratulate her publicly.
Thank you, Dr. Tranquil.
You may now walk across.
Okay, do we have any, well, we have a facilities committee. I think we've pretty much had a report from them. Do we have anything further?
I have one question. I was hoping, because I'm getting hounded, can we get an update on our busing? We said a couple weeks, it's a couple months. I know that we're hamstringed here, but just a quick update.
Yes. I think our last student came through the door at exactly 9 o'clock this morning at the IS, which of course we'd like to have earlier. Our bus routes are moving back by a minute or two each day, so we're improving along that line. I actually had breakfast today at the IS, and most students were able to get there on time. We had a few running in at the last minute, but they had grab and go and they went. So we are seeing slow, gradual improvement. I know our transportation director has been in close contact with our vendor, and again, we are seeing those times move back. So we still are getting there later than we would like, but we are getting there and getting there earlier than I think last week.
Well, and I know a couple of us were concerned about the high schoolers being able to get to school in time to be able to grab breakfast. Do we have any word on how that went for them this week?
I think the high school and the middle school are doing very well as far as they're getting the breakfast. The trouble is more at the elementary level. And again, just this morning, we saw the last buses coming through and kids were missing, 5 minutes of instruction. Mr. McGinty was there directing traffic and having kids get their grab and go down the hall to class in very good order.
Can I just ask a quick question about the free breakfast?
Yes.
So, one, thank you for addressing the transportation concern. Two, I guess there was some question. I know we were asking for people to sign up, for parents to sign up if they had interest, and I believe that was to get accurate numbers so we wouldn't have food wastage, which makes sense. But I guess it was a little bit different amongst the schools in that, I heard that at some schools, if they didn't sign up, they couldn't get the breakfast, and then at other schools, even if they didn't sign up, they were encouraged to eat the breakfast, and some parents didn't want them to eat the breakfast, which leads to my second point. So that's one. So I'll let that simmer for a bit. But then the other question, because that was a lot. But my other quick question was the menu. Now I believe you can have whole grain Pop-Tarts, but I'm not sure. So I'm just.
Mine was blueberry this morning, Dr. Serene.
Some of the items, like I believe in trying to have a healthier breakfast, perhaps that rush of sugar. And while Pop-Tarts, I love Pop-Tarts too. I was just wondering how we pick the menu in all honesty.
And
like
the mini cinnies are very popular. The mini cine buns.
Yes, those cine buns, they're full of goodness.
So let me get back to you on that question.
I just because it's like sometimes
It's a
just
fair
having
question.
a few. I mean, there is fruit, which is good. I've noticed that. So to be fair, but
they all meet the wellness standard.
I know
number
they
one,
do, and
otherwise
so
they
we've
couldn't serve
actually
them.
brought this up
Right.
when it comes to lunches too. I mean, I think
and
those
that's-
standards
and
are a
that's-
little.
We may be in technical compliance
Correct.
as we serve the Pop-Tarts, Dr. Serene.
Yep.
Dr.
maybe
Serene,
some
are you
whole grain
telling me?
toast.
Are you telling me that I should not have bought mini cinnamon rolls for my cafeteria at work?
No.
Okay.
I mean, they're
Your
good,
point-
but then
your
you
point
don't
is
feel
well
great.
taken.
Like
Plus,
30
you're going to
Okay,
throw off
folks,
the
it's
positive
getting a little
behavior.
late. It's getting a little late.
But thank you.
Do
Let
we
me
have
come
any
back to you.
other comments or
Ms.
new
Reinhardt,
business?
no, I do have another.
Go
quick
ahead.
comment. I actually wanted to kind of bring this back to education, if that's okay. And I think it was Mr. Carney who had brought up that there was some, I think it was the nation's report card was released today. Fourth and eighth graders fell behind in reading and had the largest ever decline in math, according to a national educational assessment showing the devastating effects they said of the COVID-19 pandemic. I would say of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. These alarming findings were based upon the National Assessment of Education Progress reading and math exams. First National Assessment of Student Achievement in 3 years revealed the largest math score declines amongst fourth and eighth graders since the initial trial assessment in 1990. Discouraging results came more than a month after the National Assessment released results showing math and reading scores for 9-year-olds, typically fourth graders, fell between 2020 and 2022 by levels not seen in decades. The nation's report card offered the first detailed look into how health crisis disruptions and virtual learning affected fourth and eighth graders across the country. The report shows that the pandemic, again, I think was incorrect by saying the pandemic, it was our response to the pandemic. affected all students, but had a disproportionate impact on those most vulnerable, those who fared worse.
So Dr. Trinkle, I
So,
look forward to your
can I-
report.
Yeah, so.
Because I know you're working on that.
So I do very much look forward to seeing, how did our students respond? Because, the previous administration and the prior board really significantly contributed, I think, to virtual learning in our district, something that we really fought, and I know the new board fought to stay away from, something I hope we never, ever have to consider ever again. So I very much look forward to your report. Thank you.
And in our
Any other new business?
efforts to move forward, and I echo the sentiment and the concern for those reports and the efforts to move forward, Dr. Wig, I don't think it's going to behoove any of us. I don't think it's going to be helpful to assign blame to the prior board.
Order.
It's a matter of disagreement.
I'm gonna suggest, do we have any other new business?
I'm going to finish this statement. I don't think it's productive to assign blame. What I do think is productive will be to listen to Dr. Trinker's report and to work together to see wherever we are right now at this moment in time, how we can all work together to do what's in the best interest of our kids and our community.
Is there any other new business? Okay, visitor comments?
Oh, God, they're still.
That's yours.
So I wanted to address what Dr. Mon said about the danger. Okay, about the danger of the transgender student and our perception of the danger of the transgender student. And I would like to say that I really do kind of feel insulted by the idea that anybody would say or suggest that a transgender student is more dangerous than a cisgender student. However, I also don't believe that they are less dangerous than a cisgender student, nor is a cisgender student more dangerous than a transgender student. So why then is a transgender biological male allowed into the restroom that is designated for biological females when a cisgender male is not? Also, why would a girl feel more, a biological girl, I have to add, feel more comfortable undressing in a locker room with a transgender biological male than they would with a cisgender biological male? Because the reality is, regardless of what they said in Boyertown, the majority of girls still look at that biological male as a male. That's what they see. They don't see it any different. Ask the girls. I mean, I think it would be hard to find that the majority of girls feel comfortable undressing in front of males. And if they do, and you really believe and you want to stand by the position that they do feel very comfortable undressing in front of biological males, and they should feel that way, then I think you should remove the false advertising of having pictures of girls and boys, because when the girls go in that locker room, they expect to only find girls. And when they go into the restroom with that picture on there, they expect to only find girls. And I mean biological girls when I say girls. They do not expect to see a biological male in their room undressing in front of them. And so if you truly subscribe to this idea that there are no rights to privacy, like Boyertown case said, there's no rights to that, there's no social norm, then remove the false advertising and let anybody use whichever restroom they please. Thank you.
I also want to make it clear, no one mentioned that people who struggle with their identity or transgender, whatever you want to call, are more dangerous. That is not at all the issue. The issue is that there's a boy in the girls' bathroom and in the girls' locker room. In regards to the bathroom, you keep looking at the people who are struggling with their identity. Not one school board member, the SL solicitor, Dr. Mahan, not one of you mentioned any concern for the girls. None. Dr. Mahan, you mentioned civil rights. How does a biological boy have a civil right to use a bathroom and locker room of his choice? His choice. Do you not fear of a school lawsuit alleging the school failure to protect a girl, violating her privacy right? As Dr. Friel mentioned, 9 out of 10 victims of sexual assault are females. Nearly all perpetrators are male. And females aged 16 to 24 have 4 times the rate of sexual assault as the general population. Have any of you considered that many girls have been sexually abused and assaulted, and having a male in the female bathroom triggers post-traumatic stress disorder? Have you considered that a girl has a right to feel uncomfortable in a restroom or changing in a locker room in front of a boy? And what about her need for privacy? And to deny those feelings for those girls is dangerous and sets that child up to be a victim in school or out of school. You know that there is no law. All the voices around you, school board members, all your voices around you are instilling fear in you to hold you back from doing the right thing, which is to stop the boys from using the girls' bathroom and locker rooms. There's a powerful and successful law firm that I know that will help you implement the privacy policy and that will take your case should you face a lawsuit. School board members, you do not need Dr. Mahan and you do not need this SL solicitor to implement this privacy policy. I want you to know that. And you do not need this solicitor to defend you if you are faced with a lawsuit. I promise you, if you take the stand and stop the boys from using the girls' locker room and restroom, you will win. I promise you that. Dr. Mahan, you never answered Mr. Dimming's questions. You knew about the email about the gender identity training hidden from parents 7 weeks ago. You still haven't told us your plan. Also, Dr. Mahan, you said that it depends on the specific child and situation. It sounds like you're alluding that the child fears his parents.
Ms. Holt, your time is up.
Then if that's true, the teacher, counselor, or administration has a mandatory responsibility under the law to call social services on the parents.
Before I begin, I've asked the technical director if I can post something. Are you able to get it up? I've asked him if he can post graphics from the book Funhouse that is currently available to minors in our library, 13-year-olds. Can we please post that?
Well, we've all seen it.
We've all seen
I'd
it.
like the community to see it. I think they have a right to see it as well.
Is this it?
No, wait, that is able to be circulated to the board if you would like us to see.
Are you saying that you're not willing to display it to the community?
Right,
We're
but
not
if
having a conversation here.
Right.
We're going to have a speaker. You have 3 minutes to speak, Mr. Durham.
So is there a question I then to post it?
I'll defer to the solicitor.
Where is it coming from? I don't know what we're
This is
viewing.
These are graphics from the book Fun Home, which is currently available to 13-year-olds in our.
I'm just going to interject that that's a timer. It's not an audiovisual aid. It's not used for this purpose or others other than timing for speakers.
I wasn't planning to speak tonight.
Let's not have this conversation now. Let's just go ahead with the
That's
speech,
fine.
okay? Okay.
I wasn't planning to speak tonight.
This board and administration has done some good things that they should be applauded for. Balancing the budget, facility improvement, ending the mask mandate and quarantine policy. These are all good steps. However, there is much more work to do. If this district has no discretion over books that are available to minor students through SORA, then I ask the board to end the district's association with SORA immediately. Books such as Funhouse, which depict oral sex and anti-Christian sentiment, should not be available to minor children. Right now, that book is available. We notified the district weeks ago about this book. Last year, the community did its job in providing oversight to the district about a book called Lawn Boy, in which we got removed. It is your job to do the oversight, not the community's. End the relationship with SORA immediately. As Mr. Schindler said, the board and administration were notified on September 2nd that administration guidance in the intermediate school was to keep children's gender identity in the intermediate school away from parents. Not only that, the email from building administration sought to coach teachers how to deceive their parents. If any teacher would have to call home to parents of a transgender child, no reasonable person can conclude that that is appropriate. Acknowledging that gender identity issues present significant mental and emotional challenges for children, isn't it imperative that parents be involved with their own children's welfare? The fact that counselors would keep this information from parents disqualifies that counselor from ever counseling my children. Tomorrow, I will give notice that my children are not to be counseled by any counseling staff without my prior permission and my presence. Keeping secrets from parents of minor children is abhorrent conduct. Those who advocate for such policy need to be immediately removed or undergo corrective training that protects parents' rights. I respect all of you. I really do. But I cannot believe that no one tonight, no one has stated their view that it is wrong to hide the gender identity of a 9-year-old from their parents. No one has spoken up against that tonight. No one is saying this is appalling. Shame on us. You asked Dr. Mahan, are you acting on this? You are the elected representatives of this community. You act on it. This is not an autocracy. Be the leaders that we elected you to be. Dr. Mahan, you said we need to realize we are dealing with individuals in these students. You're correct. So you are saying there might be a scenario where we should keep a 9-year-old's gender dysphoria a secret? This never should be the case. If you believe—
Mr. Durham, your time is up.
I was delayed a couple moments. Got 10 more seconds, please.
Okay.
If you believe in parents' civil rights, you must reveal this to parents. If you have a fear that doing so would jeopardize the welfare of the child, you must inform the authorities. There is no middle ground in keeping a secret. And I want to note, you spent far more time talking about a scoreboard tonight than about parents' rights and this email that was sent to the intermediate school. That is a difficult thing to ascertain, the priorities. Thank you.
What? We got one more. I know, I'm ready.
Thanks again. I want to thank Ms. Trinkle and Mr. Pigeon for communicating with me so quickly about the issue that I had. Breakfast, ASD, terrible too. They used to have the same cinnamon things. When I used to teach, when the kids couldn't finish, I used to get some. So they were awful, but I ate them. But I agree with you that somehow they should be healthier. Dr. Way, I have something for you too. Thanks for bringing up the academic part. I did see a commissioner of Ed Stat said about those scores. There's nothing in the data that says we can draw a straight line between the time spent in remote learning in and of itself and student achievement. For example, in 8th grade reading, there was no correlation at all. City schools where students were most likely to have missed more in-person days held steady in reading. Suburban students who tended to have
more in-person days fared worse. So again, be careful about how we're drawing the lines. Mostly I want to talk, thank you, Jeff, for asking the questions, and the superintendent and solicitor for explaining. Virginia board paid $1.3 million in a settlement for the Grimm case that went to the Supreme Court. So millions. A $4 million suit, a jury verdict was thrown out, but there was a $4 million verdict. The judge in the Boyertown case talked about how certain policies very publicly brand transgender students with a scarlet T. As far as privacy, one judge said they are minding their own business like any other students. In Boyertown, they said discomfort felt by some can't compare to the harm caused to transgender students. I know I went to New York Broadway, and at intermission, they changed the bathrooms to anyone could use them. And I was at a urinal, there were women coming in behind me, and it was discomfort, excuse me, it was a discomfort. I could have left. And it's not the same thing as a school and a child, I understand that. But discomfort doesn't take away certain rights. Courts haven't agreed with the safety threat because of lack of data. I thought I heard tonight people saying that I heard predator and grooming for educators that were respecting student privacy. When you say there's safety issues, you're saying that there's a certain group of people that aren't safe. When you say there's a danger, you're saying certain people are dangerous. If someone does something inappropriate, no matter who it is, in a bathroom, please have consequences. Otherwise, these are our children, our students, and parents of these students. Let them do their business comfortably so that we can get on to other business. Thank you.
Okay, with that, motion to adjourn. Second, any more comments or questions?
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.